All right, y'all, if I could get your attention, we're going to try to go ahead and get started. We're already behind schedule, and appreciate everybody's patience with this meeting. We didn't know the house schedule was going to be like it was when we planned this, but we thought it was important enough to keep moving and keep rolling and push through. Chairman Jaspers is in the rules right now, and he'll be coming over as soon as they handle their business over there. And I'm sure some of the other members are on rules as well, and we may have a few start coming in, but just want to go ahead and get us kicked off and get us rolling. I know we've got some folks that need to leave. Ed, if you want to come on up, and we'll let you go first, and then we'll go to Commissioner Dozier, and then we'll jump back to our agenda for committee members, and we'll go ahead and get started. Ed, we'll turn it over to you, and look forward to hearing what you have to say about the shortage of truck drivers and driver training and all the issues that we've got in that sector of our economy. So the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. May I ask, is this suitable, or would you prefer I was over there? Okay.
Whatever works for you. Standing or?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if that works. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for taking the time to hear me. I will try to be brief because I know others are time constrained as well, and I know you've got a full agenda. For the record, I'm Ed Kroll, the president and CEO of the Georgia Motor Trucking Association. We're an 88-year-old trade association here in the state, and proud to be here. We represent well over 600 trucking companies and trucking industry companies throughout the state. I believe we have members in every single district in the state as well, and I imagine most of you know someone involved in the trucking industry. I want to briefly talk with you in terms of rural development, the need that we have in our industry, and the opportunity that exists, especially through the technical colleges of Georgia, to build the trucking industry here in the state by helping us find and create truck drivers. Let me give you a little background on this current situation. The driver shortage, which is famous now, everybody sees it on the news and everybody's paying attention to the logistics crisis. That is nothing new. Every year we survey the industry, and for the last 6 years running, driver shortage has been the top industry in the state. The only thing that ever comes close is tort reform. But driver shortage is not only an issue in the state, it's an issue nationwide. Surveys show that we are currently about 80,000 CDL truck drivers short of what we need. And let me be clear, I refer to the freight hauling CDL drivers. There are millions of CDL drivers in the country. Everything from school bus operators to the airport shuttle folk to tow truck drivers often are required to have CDLs, but there are about 2 million that are hauling freight day in and day out from the ports of Georgia and around the state. We're about, as a nation, 80,000 short of what we need now. That is only going to grow. The pandemic of the last 18 months encouraged an awful lot of our workforce to retire early. Our workforce, truck drivers, skew older than the average workforce. The average truck driver today is 52 years old. That is a higher average than the average worker in the United States. And more than a few at the top end of that decided the pandemic was enough of a reason to take an early retirement. And what that did, of course, is create an even greater gap on the front end for the need for new entrants. In addition to that, we have new entry requirements coming in February of 2022, which will require additional training for those young people, additional training for new entrants into the industry. This is a great industry, however, for just about everybody. This is an industry that actually mirrors America. Truck drivers right now, if you look at the demographic makeup, are about 65% white, 13% Black or African American, 15% Latino, very close to the population of the United States. Where we lack on the female side, only about 10% of truck drivers are females. That's actually increasing faster than any other demographic in trucking. Women are finding out they can make a career in the industry, and that has more than doubled in the last 5 years as the wages and the conditions have improved. Right now, trucking industry wages are averaging over $50,000 a year for a truck driver, and some are going north of $75,000 and $80,000. In addition, there are sign-on bonuses like they were baseball players. There are companies out there offering $20,000 to sign on if you've got a CDL. A CDL is a valuable commodity. And it's something we need more of here in the state. Now, there are impediments, there are issues that we're dealing with. And in fact, the infrastructure bill that just passed is helping us, I hope, with a pilot program, because we have oddities in the law, some of which you frankly can't do anything about. There's a federal law that does not allow anyone under 21 to operate a truck in interstate commerce. They can drive a tractor trailer at 18. And in fact, people do. They can in the state of Georgia. They can in, I think, every other state except one in the entire country. And they do. And when you think about it, it makes it sort of strange. It means that an 18 or 19 or 20-year-old can drive from Valdosta up to Dalton, but they can't take a load from Dalton into Chattanooga. Or they can drive, from Dalton down to Columbus, but they can't cross to Phoenix City. They can drive the entire width of Texas, but they can't go into Arizona. They can drive the full length of California, but they can't cross into Nevada. It's a weird law. It's a federal law that we're hoping to get changed. And it is, there's a pilot program in the newly passed infrastructure bill that will allow us to start looking at that with proper oversight. So that's a little basics about the industry. Good wages, a crying need for employees. And the nice thing about trucking is it really doesn't matter where you live. You can train, you can go to the technical colleges and train, and there's a great opportunity and a great career ahead of you. An awful lot of people who own trucking companies today started out as drivers and built their business. So I would commend it to you as a great opportunity for folk who aren't going to pursue anything else in terms of going to college. I shouldn't say not pursue anything else, but aren't planning on college. It's a great career, but we have that impediment of trying to get an 18-year-old to get into the trucking industry. And so we're working on that as well. I do want you to understand that the technical college system, and I know the commissioner will speak to this, is doing a great job in the training that it does. It's having a difficult time keeping up with the demand. And I will say to you, what they can't say to you, which is please fund everything they ask for. Please give them all they want when it comes to truck driver training, because we desperately need it. Right now, I think there are about 18 programs at 20 of the schools, or 18 out of the 20 schools, and about 36 locations around the state. But some of those locations are turning away hundreds of would-be truck drivers because they just don't have the capacity. It is not cheap to run a truck driving program. It is not cheap to run a CDL program. My understanding is HOPE provides some coverage of it, but what HOPE provides for it, because it is a compressed program, it's not multiple semesters, HOPE doesn't cover the cost. So every time a technical school is putting someone through the CDL program, they are losing money moving that student through. So the school needs the support in order to keep doing that. And the commissioner will correct anything I say that's wrong, I'm sure, but I think that's true. That is true, isn't it? Yes. Yes, thank you. So we need truck drivers, but the school system loses money if they train truck drivers. So we need to look at that funding formula and how that is handled, how that comes about. The other thing they need, quite honestly, is just money for assets. Trucks are not cheap. You've got to have good equipment to train people on, and then you've got to do something else, which is becoming more difficult. And I admit all of this is difficult. You've got to pay the instructors a competitive wage, or else they'll leave and go be instructors at trucking companies. And I told you how quickly salaries are rising at trucking companies. Now, I may bury the lead a little bit, but I'll tell you it's worthwhile to the state, because these are great jobs to be had, but also the return is incredible. It cost overall about $2,000 to train a truck driver and get them started. Well, the average wage is $50,000. That's a 20 time return on the money invested. And you think about the lifetime of taxes that driver, that employed person is going to pay back to the school, the state will more than recoup what it invests in creating truck drivers. Georgia wants to be a logistics center. You cannot be a logistics center if you don't have enough truck drivers. We move as an industry 75 to 80% of all the freight that moves in the entire nation. We're the only thing that delivers to 100% of Georgia. So you can't be a logistics center if you don't have a good, solid core of truck drivers. So I would commend that to you. I will be glad to take any questions. I'm going to send Blake some follow-up information as well. But Mr. Chairman, with that, if there's any questions, otherwise I'm happy.
I think we've got a few here. 29.
Sir.
Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. I thought we were in a Southern Baptist church. I thought Commissioner Dozier hit an amen when you said fund
There you
everything he wants. One of the things you hit on, what are the new training requirements that's coming up that we're going to have to work through?
It's a great question. There are basically two sets of new training requirements, some of which are common sense. There is classroom time required. And what they've done is they've done performance standards. That is, the classroom time has to cover certain areas of the federal motor carrier safety regulations, but it's not specified how many days or weeks they need to spend to do that. They just have to certify that they've covered it, they're proficient in it, they can pass a test on it. Then there's behind the wheel time that has to be taken with a certified instructor. And again, the feds have not set an exact time. You know, it's not like our student drivers are 40 hours behind the wheel. It's a certain time until that instructor says this person demonstrates proficiency. And after that, they can go get their test. So they can't take a test anymore without doing that training.
So this is for, Mr. Chairman, could I follow up with a couple? So this is for new CDL holders, not,
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But secondly, I was unaware that we were turning away hundreds of people that want to gain their CDL. One of the things that we've done this past session, we added additional funding to our technical schools to add more, significantly more capacity for CDL drivers. So we're trying to address that to make sure that we can address the need. Everyone knows we have a need, and we are doing due diligence to make sure that we can address it, because every single thing in this room was brought here on a truck. And
I'll give you an amen for that.
It is so important. And lastly, I'll take it up with the commissioner regarding losing money on each driver that we train, because I would be interested to know more about that, because we have put incentives in place. Identify areas of need. That is certainly an area of need of training. We're training workforce. It's workforce development. We say it all the time. And this is a need. We see the problem. We're addressing the capacity thing. And so I would like for us to dive in with the commissioner on making sure that we can see any roadblocks for trucking. Yeah. See if we see any roadblocks that, how you like that?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that. I might say, I think that some of the turning away may be a matter of mismatching of where the demand is, that a particular school may just have overwhelming demand in that area and not be at capacity. So they're turning away people where you may have another school that is not. And then my understanding on the funding is it's actually the gap has closed from what it was in the past, but that it still exists.
Ed, I guess my question is, are there any other states that do any other kind of pilot work on the job training programs in coordination with their version of a technical school that allow individuals to learn on the job and get paid, or do you just have to go to school and get your degree and then you're licensed to drive a truck? Or what are other states doing? I mean, I know this is a nationwide problem. Is there anything going on across the country with any other concepts of training?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. There are a variety of different programs being undertaken. Arkansas is one of the leaders in that area. South Carolina is doing some. A lot of it is recruiting people to be interested in the industry, which of course, if you can't handle them once you've got them interested, is kind of self-defeating. But if you don't mind, I'll pull that compendium together and send it in to y'all to see the details on those.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have veterans programs as well and others to help that transition.
Yeah, because I know it's, even people that maybe won't just make a career change.
Yes.
It's hard to take off of work and go to our technical school and get the degree to make a better life for yourself. But yet, what are you going to do in the meantime? And but anyway, I think we got some more questions. So hold on. Chairman Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Crowell, you spoke about 18 years old. In Georgia, you can drive the truck up to the Tennessee line, but a federal law, you got to be 21 Tennessee does not recognize 18-year-old drivers. That's state by state.
So from 18 to 21, it is each state that decides whether or not someone can use a CDL at that age. And I believe every state but one has now said that they're allowing that. A couple of the holdouts were actually out west. But it's a federal law that won't let that CDL driver cross into Tennessee. So you can have an 18-year-old drive to the border of Georgia. They just can't go any further if they're hauling freight in interstate commerce.
And what about insurance rate? Is it hard to insure that 18-year-old driver? Is that a problem as well?
Insurance is a difficulty for the industry. A lot of insurance companies want at least 2 years of experience, which makes it very difficult to bring someone on straight out of school. Now, what is currently being done in the industry is we have some companies that are actually self-insured, so they can develop their own programs and take that risk and put people on. Some of the larger ones are obviously the most equipped to do that, and some of those even actually operate their own training schools. In addition, some few companies, very few, have been able to work with their insurers to develop a specified program and say, okay, if we follow all these steps and do all these things, will you insure a 19-year-old, a 20-year-old, or even a 21 or 22-year-old who has no experience? Because at that point, it's not just the age, but it's actually the experience level. And the insurers are aware of this, and they're working on it with trucking companies. But it is an issue. It is an issue for the industry.
Thank you.
Chairman Berger, would you have another question, or you're good? Anybody else have any questions for Ed? I don't see any at this time. Ed, thank you for that report, and if you will, try to get us that comparison of what other states are doing to try to work on this issue. We'd appreciate that, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, sir. Blake's been great to work with. And remember, just fund everything that the commissioner needs.
I was going to say, I probably should have let him go first, but I think he's kind of set you up. You set him up pretty good. So it's going to work out.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Commissioner Dozier, come on down. Great to see you, and I look forward to hearing from you. And the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman and committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm not sure if Ed did me justice or injustice. I'll see after the questions here in a minute. I do want to say this, though, based on Ed's presentation and the chairman's comment down there. Thank y'all for the support you've given us. We have gotten a lot of support in this area by the governor and the General Assembly, and it's continuing to grow. Last year's bond package had a multitude of projects that included expansion of CDL, and very, very thankful for that support we've gotten. Having said that, from a global view, just a kind of a reminder, very, very blessed across the system of 22 colleges and 88 campuses, that we really do see that the mission of this committee being our focus. We are the workforce growers of the state of Georgia. Our mission statement says that. We believe in it, and we're here to support the industries and the companies across this state. When you look at it, even during the pandemic times, our enrollment was down slightly, and I'll talk a little bit briefly on that. We dropped about 7% in enrollment. When you look at that, majority of that reduction or drop in enrollment was around dual enrollment, just as an offspring of K-12 being slow to get up and going. About 30% reduction in dual enrollment in our system. And we looked at traditional students, we're about 2.5% down. So when you hear across the nation that others were 9% down in their community or vocational colleges, Georgia's fared very well through this pandemic, and it was through the decisions of this body and our governor that kept us running and going and allowed us to have a slight decrease versus a very robust decrease. As you look at that, our mission was to make sure the folks that came through saw the end. As you looked at students coming in, I was very, very proud this past year. We had 34,952 unduplicated graduates. What that means is a 1-for-1. We only had in our history, and I'll show more of this at the joint hearing in a few months now in January, but I'll dive into that a little more in that hearing. If you look back at the history of TCSG, we've only had 2 years of unduplicated graduates that were greater than last year, and that was the 2 years preceding right before the pandemic. Now, we had many years where enrollment was higher, than it's been, but we weren't seeing them through the end. And TCSG is seeing their folks through the end. The presidents and the staff in the colleges and your communities are doing a phenomenal job. To add to that, last year we had 61,770 total awards. So those could be duplicated. Somebody could come in and get a certificate, they could get a diploma, they could get a multitude of things, but that was the highest number we've had in years. The year prior to that was 59. So we're growing the skills that your communities have. We also, on top of that, had 8,739 associate degrees. And just to give you an idea, that was the most two-year degrees the technical college system has ever produced, and it was during a pandemic. Once again, the colleges and the staff are doing a phenomenal job. I'll dive into what you really asked me to come, Mr. Chairman. I'll thank you for that little dialogue. CDL, you should have, and I brought several because I saw logistics on there and saw, oh goodness, I'm blank all of a sudden. Thank you, diesel. So you should have some one-pagers on those three areas. And if you have other interests, we can find them. I'm just going to talk generically from them, but I want you to have a takeaway with you. But in looking at commercial truck driving, very, very proud that your support has allowed us to offer commercial truck driving at 19 of our 22 colleges. But if you look at the 88 campuses, we have 36 different locations where CDL is offered. So we are expanding. It continues to grow. If you look at enrollment alone, we are up this year over last year. We have 1,705 enrolled, up from 1,679. Now that number's still a little bit down from 2 years ago, but it's growing and showing the right movement. And if you think about it, during the pandemic, we went from training a truckload of folks where we rotated folks inside the cab to training one-on-one. And so that slowed down that process, but now we're back up and running as we've always been. And you're seeing those numbers really grow. When you look at the actual awards, you'll see that we had 1,602 awards last year. And if you look over a 3-year period, we had 5,584 graduates through the CDL program. Just real quickly, I won't go through the others to the great degree, but if you look at diesel technology, we offer that at 18 of our colleges. About 900 enrolled with 437 graduates, and over that 3-year period, 2,298. And then logistics and supply chain, that's something we've talked about before. We have 11 of our 22 colleges, half of them offering a program, and it's a host of programs, anywhere from warehouse distribution, logistics specialist, supply chain management, business logistics, inventory control technician, and many, many others. If you look at it over a 3-year period, we had right at 3,000 graduates. So our technical colleges, when you look at those 300,000 folks enrolled and those 34,000 unduplicated graduates, we're doing a lot in the area that's hitting those local communities. And that's what our focus is, and we continue to make sure that's our focus. I wasn't planning on talking about what Ed brought up, but I know the chairman over here is itching for an answer. We do operate a lot of our programs at a loss, and CDL is one of those. It's amazing what our colleges and our presidents do. They operate more like a private business than many of you would ever think, because just giving you an example, one of my college presidents was explaining just the other day that his annual budget to operate his college is right at $70 million. His state portion of funds that come to him is right at $22 million. So as you look at it through the economic development efforts, as far as doing training for our industries to match their needs, on top of the credit side, we often just talk about the credit side. They really do have to look at grants, local partnerships, donations, and our industries really support our technical colleges. Some of that came to light recently. We've been working with Ed and a group of commercial truck driving companies on how do we really focus on increasing those numbers. And that's what Ed was referring to. If you look at CDL, we do operate just under $1,000 loss per student. That's not what I came to speak on, but since he brought it up and that question was asked, that's about the difference of what it cost. Just a reminder, Hope Funds is one of our 17 high career demand fields, and I appreciate this body and the governor supporting that Hope funds so many of the areas that we need workers in. And as a reminder, that's one of the areas that has a differentiated funding mechanism through Hope. We typically, on all our programs, it's $100 per credit hour to actually fund a program, and Hope funds that on those 17 career fields. CDL is one of the areas that's actually higher. So Hope actually funds $1,000 toward that program per student. It just doesn't cover the full cost. And that's something our college presidents manage on a daily basis. But we continued to expand that program. We continued to focus on it. And through your support, these last few years, we've been able to actually make a robust change in it. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there's some questions, but I'll pause there and see how I can answer those or follow up after this meeting.
All right, you do. We'll start with Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for this. So just help me understand regarding the CDL program. Is there a prescribed number of hours that each student must attend class, and or is there an accelerated program? If I've been driving a truck for 15 years, I don't have the CDL, I've been under 23,000 pounds, and I know the rules of the road. Is it tailored for each person, or is it doesn't matter, you've got this, and how long would that be if that is the case? I didn't know if there were lenient. I know in some of our technical skills that you go at your skill level, and you advance. Is the CDL part of that, or is it?
So CDL, as in many of our programs, we offer a credit program for CDL, and we offer a non-credit program. The non-credit program does not fall under Hope or any of those, and it can be customized training for our industry. Those programs can be shortened and sped up in order for a certain industry to get their employees through a program and tested, and they may have some history as far as driving commercial trucks, things of that nature. As far as the credit program goes, I believe that's between 5 and 7 weeks. I have to look over here. So I'm correct. So if you come in without any experience, you're looking to get a credit program that you can actually transfer some of those into a future opportunity. It's going to be 5 to 7 weeks, depending on the college. It's going to be the same number of hours, just depending on how they expand it over that 5 to 7 weeks. And then when they get out, they can test to get their commercial license. But like I said, we have a lot of non-credit programs. We had about 300 of that number of graduates went through a non-credit program. And that's where you basically come in and train for a certain industry that may have a certain skill that they need to. Just as a reminder, the CDL has 2 portions of the testing. When somebody's either goes through the third-party testing or goes through our Department of Driver Services, you do a walk around. Well, you do a written to start with, but you do a walk around of identifying the vehicle parts and operations. Then you do the driving portion. Depending on that individual skill and set, you are able right now to carve down some of those training hours. And if Ed's still in here, he can correct me, but I believe that's some of the federal things he's talking about, is it may mandate a certain number of hours trained if this federal reg passes that he was speaking of earlier, that then would push everybody to a more standardized type training.
As a CDL holder, I don't have the 20,000 bonus. That walk around actually is the hardest part.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is.
Number 16, Chairman Dick. You got, okay. Chairman Jaspers, welcome back, and other members from the Rules Committee. Thank y'all for joining us. Y'all been hard at work.
We have in Rules Committee, and we'll be voting on an elections bill tomorrow. Chairman, Commissioner Dozier, I've got just a couple of questions. You may have hit them, but I just want to make sure I got it right. How many seats are available in Georgia for truck driver training right now?
Yep, I did not hit the exact number of slots we have. Do any of y'all know that can help me, or will we need to get that back to the committee? I can get that to you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, and I guess that goes along with, and I know, we increased your funding last year. And what was the potential, how many more would that add to that number?
Yep.
I think that's important for the community to know that we're making it.
We'll get that for you, and you're right. As you guys supported and funded, I think it was specifically 3 bond packages to help on CDL. It may have been 4, but I know of 3 right off the top of my head. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And so I want to follow what your Chairman Perkle kind of hit on was what I guess this goes down to the folks doing the just education at the ground level. But what are we doing innovatively to shorten that time? The study, are we using kind of remote learning, so that an individual who may have plenty of time to be a non-credit person can just sit in a classroom and get it on and get it done, besides the driving time, besides the seat time?
Sure, sure.
What are we doing to help that move along?
Right. I think that still got to grow in that area. Through the pandemic, we did make sure that we offered online education in all of our areas. Obviously, that's what kept things going. But to your point, the behind the truck side kind of merged in the CDL, and a lot of them were still coming in for that seat time. But
Sure.
we did merge for all of our coursework to have some online learning. I'm not sure where we are today on that, if we went back to the standard training, and I'll have to get that for you as well.
And just following that other question I asked a kid, when you're looking into it, I just want to know, how full are we?
Yep.
Across the state? Which ones have waiting lists? Which ones don't?
Absolutely.
and
And
then also-
speaking of that, just to let you know, last year we did have a 600-person waiting list, but we'll get that spread for you on where it was
Sure.
across the state.
And then I guess follow up to that, I just like to know what we're doing to, advertise. I think that's something I think that the committee we've looked at over the years is with TCSG, how are we telling our students
Mhm.
what it is? Do we have any kind of remote, or not remote, it's not the appropriate word, but like simulator where we can take them and
We do.
show them at a school, take them to whatever school it is and say, hey, this is an idea you might want to look into. Are we doing anything on the workforce development side with something like that?
I'm sure we are at each college, but I'd have to culminate that totally. We've done a big marketing plan statewide on Succeed Sooner, making sure that just as in CDL, we're getting hit, obviously, as you guys are across the state and just about everywhere we train in, whether it's manufacturing, CDL, forklifting. And we've launched that you can come to us and get it done quicker and come out. And thankfully to you guys and the governor, we can do it with very little debt on our students at $100 per credit hour, most of that falling under HOPE funding. So we have taken a global look at supporting the things as a whole, and then we have spotlight CDL and other specific training things, but I'd have to get from the colleges how they're actually hitting that local DOE with simulators. We do have those type of things.
Yeah. Just thank you. Just lastly, on that non-credit, folks that earn non-credit, are any of those CDL over the road drivers, or are they specifically things like you mentioned, forklifts?
No,
just
we
that
have-
random, but we're doing some of that
Yeah,
too.
we're opening non-credit programs every day when there is a funding model for it. The thing on non-credit is it does not qualify for the HOPE or anything. So there has to be a connection of students who are willing to pay, or an industry that wants to train specifically their drivers. And so we are expanding that each and every day. We have one right now that's expanding up at Northwest Georgia, or Georgia Northwest. I always mess that up. But yes, sir, we expand that each and every day. And you'll see in your handout that 2 years ago, we had a larger number, almost 1,000 that graduated in non-credit. And that's as a company comes to us and says, we have this opportunity, and we partner with them each and every day to make sure we're getting as many drivers out there as we can.
Thank you. We're good.
And I know you're talking about supply chain and logistics and things, but I have a question about, we have a shortage and a supply issue with nurses and medical and healthcare. Are we working and putting some emphasis on that?
Absolutely. Just as CDL, we're expanding our nursing programs each and every day and creating bridge programs. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but to give you an idea, we graduated right at 4,900 nurses last year, not counting all the other healthcare certificates that we have. And those continue to grow each and every year. And we continue to move the LPN program, because we are the primary provider of LPN, into a bridge for RN, and we're seeing advancements in that area as well. So absolutely, healthcare, especially during this pandemic, our motto has been, we train heroes, primarily because of healthcare, but then also because of our essential workers such as CDL and logistics and everything else. So be happy to share those numbers.
Thank
with
you. I appreciate that. We're seeing a shortage in rural Georgia of healthcare workers of all types. And I think our local college right now is working to do some things for our EMS training
Yep.
because we're losing those to the hospitals.
That's
So,
right.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Floor leader, Ricky, is that you, 25?
Think so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. No, you and I talked a couple of weeks ago about that 2-year requirement and possibility of doing something with a extra level of certification or whatever, but this is my 7th year. Every year that I've been up here, one of the elements of helping with the driver shortage has been truck weights. And there's probably going to be more conversation about it in other areas. I see Georgia Forestry and others are here. But I keep looking around the southeastern region, and bordering states have different truck weights. I know that we've spent a lot of money on roads and bridges in Georgia over the last couple of years. You had mentioned y'all were going to meet with someone from maybe Georgia Forestry, the insurance commissioner, someone that represented insurance folks, technical college system. But it seems like another element that people don't want to talk about, you bring up truck weights, everybody kind of gets nervous, but it's tort reform. And you know, I'm just a one little old country boy in South Georgia. I don't have it figured out, but I do know if you don't talk about it openly and honestly, and have a real conversation about it, it doesn't happen. So here's the question. Isn't that kind of what you were going to discuss with the insurance commissioner and forestry and all the partners to see if we could figure something out?
So thank you for bringing that up. I figured it would. And we had a great conversation on the phone. And prior to the chairman's conversation, I had a conversation with the former chairman, Nimmer, on the same issue. He called with a concern around the 2-year requirement for many of our companies to hire CDL drivers based on insurance requirements. My understanding is, I'm obviously not an insurance expert, but my understanding is the actuarial assessment based on new CDL drivers has put a lot of our companies at risk because they cannot hire a new driver. And that's the balance of how do we get to where an actuary can get comfortable to where the rates for these companies can hire someone that's in between that 1 and 2 year experience. We have offered and we have met with industry and with the department to talk about if there's an appetite for us to create a education program that would satisfy those actuaries, that we would be all on board with creating something beyond the regular CDL program that could offset some of that 2-year experience. I'm not sure how that would play out in the actuarial science world or the insurance world, but that's something that we have had a couple of meetings and we've had that discussion, but have not gotten any feedback as far as moving forward on that.
So they have a trainer and a driver that drives around Coffee County and maybe that little area. They ought to get a master's degree in driving a truck if you'd send them up here to Atlanta and let them drive around for about a half a day. And if they come back and there's no dents in the truck, then they pass. Because I do worry that we're training a lot of them at these technical colleges in these rural communities, and they've never driven through Atlanta, Georgia, or Valdosta Lounge down towards Brunswick, Jacksonville. So if they can make it driving around Atlanta, I think they can work for somebody without 2 years experience.
Yes, sir.
Representative Williams, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm referring back to a little earlier, Chairman Justice was talking, but on the experience outside of the rural area, I knew a guy who got his CDL and went through the Great Smoky Mountains and left his truck at a truck stop and said it was not for him when he saw the trailer riding beside him. So it's quite different than driving in Midway, Georgia. But the question that the chairman was referring to, and this is kind of a piggyback. I question how well we're doing letting people know about what's available when they're not in the system already or not in high school where the access to all the handouts are. People, when you've got over 30,000 openings, a lot of people out there, if it isn't done word of mouth, they don't know anything about the process of getting a CDL. Someone has to tell them. And I'm just wondering, because some of the private companies do a much better job of talking about a career in truck driving than we do as a state. That bothers me. I miss Leo Beckman, I guess we were in rules, but when I've seen 12 and 14 container ships backed up in the port coming into Savannah, and we can't get drivers to haul things off from the port. Just looks like there's a heck of a return on investment if we let people know through the medium we have at our disposal what the opportunities are. I mean, I'm riding along, coming up here for $17,000 job, and the back of the truck says $83,000 a year to drive. And I thought about sending word back that I'm gone. I want a truck.
We'll save you a slot, Representative Williams. I agree. Marketing is, our private competitors spend a lot of money on marketing in all their programs. And that is an area in state government. We continue to try to figure out what's that balance of funding for marketing as far as all across all our programs. So very fair statement, and something I want you guys to know that we look at each and every day and continue to try to grow and figure out.
Chairman Purgle, one more question and
So
I'm gonna
very
close
quick,
this up.
and you're so very kind to let me do this. But piggybacking on Representative Laricchia's comment regarding the two years. Do we actually have the data? Because the actuarial and risk assessment is based on data.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you're insuring a 16-year-old kid in your house, you realize you actually pay a higher price because of the actuarial. Do we have the data or it compiled that shows the proven value, if it exists, for someone that receives a technical certificate from the state of Georgia in the CDL program? We drove 3 million miles last year with recent graduates, and no accidents or whatever we have, that we can show proven value to help with the 2 year, because if an insurance company, and it's based on risk, it's based on data assessment. If we actually have the data,
so
that
we
might help prove.
Yeah, great question. And we're on the early look at the data you're asking about. The first step that we're currently assessing, and we haven't gotten to that part, but that's actually part of what we're trying right now, just to assess what is the pass rate for CDL that comes through the technical college, which will start down the road of where you're talking about the safety as far as driving on the road. We have that data going back to the nurses. When you look at the pass rate for someone who goes through our LPN program or our RN program, very, very proud TCSG has the highest passing rate of the nursing test of all our institutions. When you look at we have typically 99-point-something% passing rate on that test, but I do not have that data. We're actually partnering with DDS right now to sparse the data first on what's the pass rate of our students compared to others, but then beyond that, what is the driving record? So you and I are thinking alike. We just don't have the data available at this point in time.
I said I had one final question, but my co-chair's going against me here. He wanted to follow up on, I think.
Just real quick, just on Chairman Perkle's question.
Yes, sir.
In your statement a moment ago that you'd worked with the insurance companies on with the actuaries on this training time, what was the barrier? You said you'd met twice and it kind of like stopped. What is it something that we can find out for you, or what is?
Yep. No, I didn't perceive a barrier at this point. It was really our meeting with the Department of Insurance and how we move forward on what will the insurance companies and their actuaries be willing to open up. And we just haven't gotten to the answer yet. So 2 great first meetings. We also been meeting with the industry on that area. So can't give you a specific barrier other than we just hadn't had a 3rd meeting yet. But
Well, I wish you'd keep us in mind and keep us informed on how this is moving. It's very
Absolutely.
important, what, you know,
yes, sir.
you can tell how important it is to us.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Commissioner, this will be the last question and we'll let you go. How many other programs do you operate that lose money?
Great question. A lot of our programs that, if you think about it, that have a low number to oversee and have a high cost as far as equipment goes, such as nursing and others, all of those typically, because of our very affordable model for our students, lose money. And so we do a great job of balancing out the global operations of TCSG to balance those that aren't making money versus those that make a little bit of money. And just to give you an idea, if you're talking about a classroom with, 40 kids sitting in it, that one's going to have to make some money to offset those that have 10 or 15 because of the regulations of actually having a 1 to 15 with a master's level type nurse overseeing that training, as well as when they go out for clinicals, having a master's level nurse going to the hospitals when you're not even charging for those clinical hours because those are outside the purview of the program. So I didn't come today to ask for money for all those programs. That was something Ed brought up. But it's hard to answer what's that exact number because it's quite a few that if you look through that have a expensive equipment, low number that we can train at one point versus those that you have a large number sitting in a class. And that's why you have a unified set tuition rate of $100 per credit hour that we have to then manage.
Right. Well, I'm just trying to figure, we all know that we have a driver shortage.
Yes, sir.
And we're asking you to get us more drivers, but yet you're losing money to do it. And that's not a good business model.
Be happy to follow up with you guys and share that CDL data and appreciate your question on that.
Okay. All righty. Well, we're going to turn you loose. I know you have somewhere else to be, and thank you for what y'all do.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you guys putting me in where I could get to the other meeting.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And we'll keep moving on. We'll stay with this sector if everybody's okay. And for the other members that were on rules, our posture was that the commissioner had to be somewhere else and Ed had to be somewhere else. So we're jumping back around. So you haven't missed a whole lot, Representative Williams. And so we'll get John Helton. As he's online with us, we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to you and keep moving so we can try to get back to the beginning and get rolling.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. I hope my sound's okay. Thumbs up.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Thank you. Very good. My name is John Helton. I'm the executive director of an organization called Career Rise, and we serve a few different functions in the workforce development ecosystem across the state, but primarily we're a funder collaborative where we pool funds from other philanthropic organizations and then make grants to other community-based organizations that do workforce training. And then we serve as an intermediary organization. So we do a lot of wheel greasing for making programs happen and getting funding to where programs need to be happening. And in that regard, we work very closely with our public workforce development system, actually under the purview of Commissioner Dozier at the Technical College System of Georgia, but specifically WorkSource Georgia, which is under the leadership of Deputy Commissioner Karen Kirchler. So I'm going to speak to that just a bit today. I think Ed and Commissioner Dozier laid the groundwork and covered a lot of the points that I was going to make in terms of the deficit that we have in supply and the increased demand because of e-commerce and people leaving the workforce. But let me focus specifically on the WIOA system. And for many of you may be familiar with the term WIOA. It stands for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And that's the piece of federal legislation that's appropriated by Congress to the U.S. Department of Labor. And then funds come down to all the states and territories to fund short-term skill-specific training. And there are a couple of 3 different categories that this funding is specifically for. Dislocated workers, which means people that have lost their jobs through no fault of their own, usually receiving unemployment insurance, and then low income. And then finally, there's a youth component, a youth funding stream for the WIOA dollars. So that fund is administered by the Technical College System of Georgia under WorkSource Georgia. and it's distributed to 19 workforce areas across the state of Georgia, 5 of which are in Metro Atlanta. And because my organization is located in Atlanta, we work very closely with those 5 workforce boards to try to leverage those public and private funds and partnerships around a wide variety of sectors: information technology, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, skilled trades, and then TDL, transportation, distribution, logistics. And that's why I was asked, I believe today, by Mr. Doss to join you all and talk about that WIOA system and its contribution to the workforce development around CDL drivers. Specifically, people who have been laid off or low income can go to their local workforce development board and apply for funding for job training. And if they're interested in CDL, there are 27 odd programs across the state that they can choose from that are on the state eligible training provider list that provides CDL training. And of course, as Commissioner Dozier said, we've got the technical college system programs there, but then, as was also mentioned, we have some private training providers as well. So I pulled some statistics from our partners at WorkSource Georgia for you all. In last program year, the last full program year, we trained under the WIOA funded system 1,011 drivers across the state of Georgia. In Atlanta, there were 487 completers for CDL training. Of those, in each of those categories, of the 1,011 of completers across the state, 716 actually passed the CDL exam, or 71% of those that actually completed the training program. For the Atlanta region, of those 487 that completed a WIOA funded training program, 309 of those, so 63% actually passed the CDL exam. So takeaways from those particular statistics, I think that there's some opportunities that you all, as I've listened in the past 30 minutes, have already begun to talk about. And that is, we have some discrepancies between who's going through the programs and how there's faring on the tail end and actually getting their certifications, or in this case, the CDL. So I think that opens an opportunity to do some better and increased screening of who's being placed into the training programs. And also calls for, I think, some more support around those people that are going through the training programs. So we were talking about community-based initiatives, or I think someone asked a question earlier about, are there any kind of innovative strategies around CDL training? And I think that, the training programs are there. I think we have some capacity issues right now and having enough programs in the right places, and then the availability of instructors to be able to accommodate. And then you compound some of the capacity issues with what Commissioner Dozier mentioned, with having to train one-on-one instead of having multiple people in a cab. And we have somewhat of a bottleneck right now. As I talk to the training providers and to my colleagues in the workforce development system, I know, for example, that we have a private provider who usually the training takes about 3 weeks because of the increased demand, or the lack of support and the increased requirements regarding COVID protocols. That 3-week training has expanded to almost a 3-month training to get people through the pipeline and to get them through their training to be able to sit for the CDL. But I think there are some innovative things that are happening. We work with a company called Prologis. Some of you may be familiar. They're an international company that has a large presence in the Metro Atlanta region, specifically around in Aerotropolis, around Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. We're working with them. They've devised, and if you don't know who Prologis is, think of them as UPS and Amazon's landlord. They have millions of square feet of distribution space and warehouse space across the country and around the world. And because they knew that their clients, Amazon, UPS, and related type industries and companies, were having difficulty in getting people, both in their warehouses, but also as forklift drivers, all the way up through CDL. So they have produced, and we're rolling it out across the Metro Atlanta region, a self-paced, someone was asking earlier about the use of technology for TDL training, a self-paced 22 module series that's free of charge to folks who'd like to explore and then learn how to get a job entry level into the TDL sector. And while this doesn't prepare them specifically for CDL training, I think it's another way to tackle that problem that we've spoken of in the committee's deliberations today around awareness and how do you let people know about the opportunities, how do you help people get their foot in the door. And when we talk about that, I'm especially concerned about people that may not have ordinarily been attracted to the sector. And when we're talking about people of color and women, I think there's some opportunities for us to continue our work working with community-based training organizations to help recruit and attract and place folks that may not have entered the sector otherwise because of a lack of awareness or a lack of opportunity. So that's kind of my pitch about the public workforce system, how it augments the other funding that's available to the technical college system, federal funds that come down. Know that we're looking at some other innovative approaches with some of the Recovery Act money that's coming down in the Aerotropolis region around TDL specifically and truck driver preparation. But I think right now, the issue of capacity for our training providers and awareness for people knowing what an opportunity or what a positive opportunity it could be are barriers to us. So I'll yield the floor, and if there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
All right, I think Chairman Jaspers has one.
John, I really appreciate it. The reason you're here is because I was sitting beside a guy at a swimming pool this summer, and he bragged about what you had done for his company and the relationships that they had made. So even though you said you were bogged down, so what's the best way if there's a company that wants to try to go this route? Is the best way for them to go? Is it to contact you guys, or what do they do?
Yeah, we can be a lot of what we do. I'll use the term again, grease the wheels, and try to connect the right people with the right people, depending on what their unique needs are. So certainly someone could contact me, and we can help broker those relationships, either with our partners at the technical college system and the other rooms of the house under TCSG, and with our local workforce boards to try and design a strategy to help accommodate what the needs are. I will tell you, the needs are overwhelming right now. Everybody is screaming for help, both in warehouses and as we approach the holiday season. This is not going to let up anytime soon. What we can do is try to increase the pipeline with those available workers that are coming in. I think, again, we have to look at how we can increase the capacity of our system. I know I wouldn't presume to speak for Commissioner Dozier, but I know that he did mention that last year there was a waiting list for the CDL programming in different parts of the state. We know that there's demand. People see this as an opportunity to enter and receive relatively quickly skills-based training that can get them a job. They know there's a job at the end of it, and a pretty well-paying job too. When you look at the salary rates, I heard one of our representatives mentioned 80-something thousand. I think I want that job too, Representative. But the average wages in Georgia, as of a study that we did last year, near $50,000 a year on average. So we're about 48,000. So these are jobs that pay a living wage and can pay a living wage. And increasingly, I think as e-commerce continues to expand and we see the growth of our TDL sector, because of Savannah and because of the airport and where we are positioned in the Southeast and Atlanta specifically in the state as a hub, then we're going to continue to see job growth and the related opportunities there. So the short answer to your question is yes, they can reach out to me and we can talk about what the solutions are. Our industry partnerships team at Career Rise, as I mentioned, TDL is one of our targeted industries that we're trying to figure out solutions for, working with our partners, and we'll be glad to talk to them.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I think that's it, John. You must have done a great job.
Okay, good for me.
All
Thank
right.
you, sir.
Well, thank you for being here today, and appreciate what you do. And keep us posted if there's anything we can do for you.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye.
All right. Thank you. All right. So now we're gonna jump back to the very beginning, and we've got Tim Brown that's going to talk about supply chain logistics, and unfortunately he's with Georgia Tech, but maybe he's got some good info for us. But that's just a joke there, Tim. I know you're not here or can't see us in the room yet, but anyway, glad to have you, and sorry for the delay. But the floor is yours.
No problem. Can you see my screen by any chance and hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your service to the state. I'm Tim Brown, Managing Director of the Supply Chain and Logistics Institute at Georgia Tech, which is the interdisciplinary center bringing together students, faculty, industry, governments, and NGOs to advance challenges in supply chain and logistics through education, research, engagement, and outreach. In terms of background, a little slide showing what we're all about here. We operate globally with, of course, our core here in Atlanta and Savannah. Georgia Tech is home to the country's largest supply chain and logistics program, with our home department, Industrial and Systems Engineering, being ranked #1 for 31 years in a row. The Supply Chain and Logistics Institute serves as a confederation of 100 faculty across public policy, industrial engineering, business, robotics, blockchain, computing, different areas that have interest in applying different techniques to forward-looking solutions in supply chain and logistics. So we are associated with the supply chain management and supply chain engineering degree programs, as well as we own the non-credit programs, the certificate programs in supply chain and logistics. Traditionally, the courses have been for post-degree people, helping them remain current on latest trends, technologies, equipment, that type of thing, in warehousing and transportation. However, in the past 6 years or so, through grants from the Department of Labor and requests from foundations like JP Morgan Chase, we've moved into some of the areas of workforce development and now do summer camps for high school students to engage them in careers in supply chain and logistics. We engage in programs for the Department of Juvenile Justice, GED academies, Goodwill employees go through our entry-level courses, et cetera. And that's in addition to our traditional post-degree programs. Let's see, and so we partner with industry and governments a lot. We're probably one of Georgia Tech's most industry-facing organizations. We work with industry daily. I brought this slide. I was asked to provide a definition of supply chain, which is very timely, given President Biden's comments on Friday that supply chain is probably a concept that's too difficult for most people to understand. But with that, I'd say that supply chain management is 3 types of flows: financial, information, and physical flows of getting materials from raw material state to finished goods state to the end consumer. So from the source of raw materials to the end consumer, all of that, financial, physical, and data flows, is supply chain management. So that entails manufacturing, the transformation of raw materials into parts and subcomponents, and finally finished goods, and maybe simple goods like paper, or maybe complex goods like automobiles or computers. So manufacturing is core to supply chain, and of course, sourcing, strategically sourcing who your suppliers are, contracting with them, negotiating with them. So sourcing and procurement is part of supply chain. Transportation, moving raw materials into the various stages of production, and from production to distribution in warehouses and to end consumer. Of course, last mile logistics is becoming more and more important. So transportation is part of supply chain management. And then on top, you see planning. So planning within each of those, planning manufacturing, planning transportation, planning procurement, and then planning across the supply chain to keep it all synchronized. And synchronization is where we've been thrown askew recently. So planning is part of supply chain. And then the area that no one wants to talk about or is often overlooked is reverse logistics. What happens if you want to return clothing? What happens if a retailer orders too much of something and can't sell it and needs to return it to the manufacturer? What if there's defects, et cetera? So reverse logistics, can be quite nasty. For your point of reference, though, the International Reverse Logistics Association is headquartered in Georgia. So hopefully Georgia can be a test bed for improving the sustainable side of logistics and consider a life cycle of goods and that type of thing. So that's supply chain in a simple diagram. You'll see that it's sort of like molecules. You have your organization, whatever the reference organization is, then it has suppliers, and suppliers have suppliers, and customers have customers. So that's how you get the chain aspect. In reality, for complex goods, it's more of a network because you have all kinds of parts coming together and intersecting. So it's not as nice and easy as a supply chain. So we turn our attention to Georgia. I like to call Georgia the supply chain state because we have all of the components here. Historically, going back to our founding with the port in Savannah, large seaports, the ports in Brunswick dealing with auto, So the ports, we have more rail line than any state east of the Mississippi. We have the interstates. We're geographically well suited, as Lee can describe to you of how we're the westernmost port on the East Coast. So we're well suited to serve not only the region, but the whole country in global trade in import and export. So we have the physical infrastructure, we have the airport, which is, I think, 11th in air cargo now and has opportunities to grow beyond that. The physical, so we've always had the physical going back to the days of Terminus. Then over time, we've become a leader in the information side of things, the logistics and supply chain software systems with companies like Manhattan Associates, American Software, Logility, those type of companies. And more recently, we've become a hub for logistics robotics with companies like Gray Orange, Dematic, and Slip Robotics being located here. Then, of course, Georgia's a fintech hub. So going back to, we've got the physical, we've got the information flows, and we've got the financial flows all emanating and headquartered in Georgia. Of course, we've got providers like UPS and Delta with their headquarters locations here. So we've got the decision makers here. We've got the users of all of the infrastructure and the supply chains, the Home Depots and the Carters by Oshkosh and the Gulf Streams here. So Georgia truly is a supply chain state. And in terms of the disruptions, a lot of people ask me now, what's the cause? It's a little bit of everything. If we go back to here, there's disruptions due to COVID, supply and demand imbalances, obviously the truck driver situation that we've discussed and that type of thing. So there's no one solution, there's no one problem. And as I've been speaking recently, for simple goods, I think the fixes will be coming about shortly. More complex goods that rely on hundreds of parts sourced from many, many countries all coming together, such as a chip being part of a finished automobile. The supply chain disruptions may continue onward. And sometimes I'm asked about COVID being the cause of it. And I said, yeah, that's part of it. But I'm almost far more concerned about some of the supply chain situations that we were facing just prior to COVID, particularly cyber threats. I think cyber threats are potential for causing more disruption than we've seen with COVID. So recognizing that this is the House Rural Development Council, and recognizing that at the Supply Chain and Logistics Institute, we're not focused on training truck drivers, we're focused on additional solutions to alleviate the challenges and try to be a little bit more forward-looking. We look at what GPA is doing with inland ports, which makes all the sense in the world to a limited extent. And by a limited extent, I mean every town should not have an inland port. It makes all the sense in the world with what's going on with the Appalachian Regional Port. All of those containers you see are containers that travel by rail up to Northwest Georgia, bypassing the highways, bypassing the need for those truck drivers. So that keeps our import and export going. I understand the go forward with the Northeast Port, just north of Gainesville. That makes all the sense in the world. Bypass again the transit. You have the right volumes, the balance between import and export. The distance is correct from the port that it makes sense for rail. Possibly one could be looked at on the western border of Georgia, Alabama, in that area. Could make sense. Have to do the data. We get requests and do analysis for towns in other areas of the state, and either import or export balances don't make sense. The rail and trucking doesn't make sense, or it just doesn't make sense. So the message is in investing in these things to do it smartly and recognize that all the pieces have to be in place. But these smart solutions are a way of keeping growth going and recognizing that there is a shortage of truck drivers. So now turning to other aspects of the driver's situation, Mr. Cromwell had mentioned about truck drivers retiring. Other issues associated with truck drivers is the living conditions and alternatives they have now for making a living, leveraging their skills in over the road. So Nissan had been working with us on, Nissan out of Smyrna, Tennessee, had been working with us on some other challenges in their supply chain. And as COVID hit, they asked us to pivot to improving vehicle deliveries. They had found that they didn't have enough drivers to get finished vehicles to the dealerships. So they asked us to build upon what we call the physical internet concept, which is companies sharing trucking and warehousing resources, leverage that technique to allow them to convert long haul movements to be short haul movements, so that it's more attractive for truck drivers. More people will stay in the business as opposed to being Uber drivers or Grubhub and that type of thing. So we're working with software providers and Nissan and a consortium of trucking companies to develop a mechanism where instead of going, I probably have a good graphic here. So here on grand scale to show you a traditional model of going cross country. A driver might leave somewhere in Canada, say, or New England, and be away for a couple of weeks, taking a load across country to Los Angeles. Away from home a couple of weeks. And can you imagine how long the tractor and trailer is sitting idle each day? It's probably only used, a half or less each day, and it's sitting waiting for the human to have their regulatory rest time and necessary recuperation before moving to the next step, the next day in the journey. Now, if we broke up the country into smooth flowing hubs where a driver is just moving from Syracuse to Buffalo and back from Buffalo to Syracuse, however many times he can do that in a day, and is home each night, then it makes it much more attractive. So we can do that in the Southeast, we can do that in Georgia, and that's what Nissan is seeking, and to expand it to other automotive companies and other companies. So kind of change the paradigm of long haul to make it attractive. And I also like it for the rural community development, in that if you think of farmers, the agricultural industry, where there may be peak times of the year and off-peak times of the year, or there may be family members that are needed in the day-to-day business and others that aren't. Well, a lot of the agricultural families are located, say, within a half hour of the interstates. So if we had hubs, these free-flowing hubs where tractors, trailers, drivers could exchange points and make the turnaround, then the agricultural employees and families could participate in that. They'd be home every day. They could participate in driving links, these short links, as much or as little as they'd like. So that's part of the game that we're seeking to change things up. Just a couple of pictorials I have here of what future complex distribution centers, in this case, where robots would disassemble the trucks and reload them in 90 seconds instead of a typical 45 minutes or an hour. And here's some prototypes of simulations we've done of what these hubs could look like. And these could make sense in more rural areas, the Adels, the Tiftons, the Cordillos, that type of thing, where a truck trailer driver exchanges could take place, quick turns. And then as we move toward electric vehicles, we can have charging of the vehicles taking place and that type of thing. So I urge you, I guess my key theme is to think of innovation going forward. Instead of way stations, rest areas, can we think more broadly of what these plots of land can be used for and where they're situated, so that they're addressing the need for tractor parking. That could be part of this, tractor trailer parking. Some of the various activities I've mentioned that could take place at these hubs. And we have, in the state, with companies like Port City Logistics and Georgia Port Authority, thinking of port systems as being more than just the plot of land that the port's in, but thinking of inland ports and relationships into mid-America. We have all the components to do innovative things like this, with the 3PLs, the Port City Logistics type companies. So in the future, we also see the intersection between people mobility and physical goods mobility, where if we're going from Macon to Atlanta, somebody needs to haul a box. We make a little bit of money at doing it for them because we're going there and we've got the extra volume in our car. And we actually see, you know, 2 Georgia companies have come together to do this with the company Rody, which was started up by having pilots and airline crews, as they go home, take lost luggage to their neighborhoods and make a little bit of money on the side. Well, the company Rody, you know, that is, you know, expanded to open it up to anybody can haul stuff. And then now UPS has purchased Rody. So, you know, Rody using people mobility will be part of the UPS model going forward. So thinking again, innovatively, and what can we encourage to offset the driver shortage. And of course, drones, you know, the UPS is the first FAA authorized provider of drone delivery to house is another example of where innovation should be encouraged. And we think of autonomous vehicles, and we think of the I-16 corridor between between Savannah and Macon as being a wonderful potential test or early adopter of that. And then if we have the truck lanes, the dedicated truck lanes between Macon and Atlanta, you know, we could have a very innovative flow going from Savannah to Macon to Atlanta, you know, helping mitigate the need for truck drivers. Additive manufacturing, I won't get into that, but mention that for rural areas, it's an area that can become a leadership role. Particularly, we look at the Marine Corps logistics base in Albany, where they have very high-end multi-material additive manufacturing capability. Can that be expanded to general industry goods and, you know, help Albany become an additive manufacturing hub? And of course, additive manufacturing changes the requirements for logistics. So finally, you know, in thinking of how state government support and regulation can help support offsetting some of the challenges we have and keep us moving forward in Georgia as a leader in supply chain. Recognize the breadth, depth, and impact of supply chain and logistics in Georgia. I would say that, I don't know if you're aware of it, but other states come to Georgia and ask for us to share our model because they see it as a leader for the country, and in particular California. They have a lot of challenges on a lot of fronts there, but they see that we have all the pieces here together. Recognize the support of supply chain does not equal more roads and roundabouts. So there I'm saying, you know, of course we need roads, roundabouts, better intersections and all, but a lot of times there's more creative ways to offset the need for more lanes by doing more creative solutions, hubs, you know, dedicated lanes, that type of thing. It doesn't have to be the old solutions all the time. Again, recognizing Georgia as a national leader in next generation logistics, the intersection of people and freight movement, the hubs, the drones, the additive, et cetera. Encouraging community experimentation like what we see in Peachtree Corners and the Curiosity Labs, the smart cities, those types of things. It's wonderful when you have a living lab with a community that's willing to experiment with these new techniques. Ensure that we're not just using funding the old operating models all the time. We ask what else or what's next, what else could we do? Encouraging public-private partnerships, encouraging investment in innovation, and reaching out to get the opinions of the latest and greatest in logistics from academic research teams. And so that's basically all I had, and would be welcome to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that in-depth overview there. Just a quick question though, and I mean, even with all the supply chain management and more roads, and it still comes back to people, right? I mean, if you don't have people to drive the forklifts and drive the trucks and tag stuff in or print stuff off or do whatever needs to be done along that supply chain, you're still going to have issues if you don't have people that work, right?
Yeah, absolutely need people, but there's always, the infrastructure versus people trade-off to some extent. So, if you think of a unit train going from Savannah to the northwest corner of Georgia, it may have 65 rail cars or more on it. And each rail car, I don't know, maybe the equivalent of 2 trucks or so. So you have the equivalent of 130 trailers moving with a crew of 2 or 3 versus 130 trailers. So instead of having 130 truck drivers, you're moving the equivalent of 130 truck drivers with 3 individuals. So it's kind of making those trade-offs of, okay, we're short of drivers. We need more, obviously, and we'll always will need more. In the interim, how do we keep the state flowing? So what other techniques can we use?
That's right. But I mean, we've got some instances across the state where these trains are getting longer and longer, and they're actually having trouble getting people to operate those trains, and splitting communities in half for long periods of time while people are transitioning from swapping the trains or whatever they're doing. So it's I mean, I guess it is still at the end of the day, it kind of always goes back to people. We've got to have people to help us do a lot of this.
Yeah, and smart planning. So what can we shift to off hours? Rather than, can we have MARTA trains with some cars dedicated to freight movement? So we're loading at the perimeter and moving across into the city using MARTA some. It could be part of the solution. Can we use MARTA at night solely for freight movement? Those things, and there's no one solution, but it's kind of smartly experimenting with different options.
Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation, and appreciate what you do over there. Next up, we've got Georgia Port Authority. Lee, are you there?
I am here, yes.
Good deal. Sorry about that delay. Appreciate you being here, and look forward to hearing from you.
Well, I appreciate you guys having us. Appreciate your time and your interest in what we're doing here. And certainly, we always appreciate your support of the port. I've got a presentation I want to share. I want to make sure you guys can see it okay. How's that? Can y'all see that all right?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Don't make us have to call that Georgia Tech fellow.
How about now?
Yep, we got you.
All right, good. Well, I know many of you have been to the port, have seen our presentation before, and this is just an update. But for those of you that have not, I'm going to try and explain everything as I go along. One thing that I always have to do is define one thing that I will say, and I don't remember to define it, you won't know what I'm talking about. So we measure these containers in 20-foot equivalent units, or TEUs. What you see here is a picture of the CMA CGM Brazil. It's the largest container ship ever to call on the East Coast. You can see it outside of Tybee right here. And it's holding the equivalent of 14,400 TEUs. Those boxes come in 20-foot lengths, 40-foot lengths, and 45-foot lengths. So the 14,400 refers to the 20-foot equivalents that it holds. But again, it's a mixture of those 20s, 40s, 45. We are all over the state, as you guys know as well. Savannah and Brunswick are the facilities that get the majority of the press, with Garden City Terminal representing about 90% of our cargo. That is our container facility. It is the largest and busiest single container terminal in the Western Hemisphere, moving last year about 5.3 million of those TEUs I just explained. We also have Ocean Terminal in Savannah, which is kind of a catch-all facility. We are now moving some containers through there as well. But they also move roll-on, roll-off cargo, which would include auto and machinery units, break bulk cargoes, which would be rolls of paper, racks of lumber, pelletized rubber, things that are moved piece by piece. And then in Brunswick, we have 3 facilities. The Colonel's Island Terminal is the largest single auto facility in the nation, second busiest auto port in the nation. Mayor's Point, which is a purpose-built facility for forest products, import and export of forest products. And then East River Terminals is the one facility that we lease the operations out, and they move bulk cargoes, including peanut shells right now, which are being used for biomass energy production. In Northwest Georgia, we do have our inland port up and running. The Appalachian Regional Port Facility has grown faster than anyone could have prognosticated. We're very excited about that fact and about the success that we've seen up there. And then in progress, we do have some federal funding helping us to build the Northeast Georgia inland facility up near Gainesville, and are excited about having that online in the near future. Now, when we look at our economic impact, these numbers are based on our fiscal year 2019 numbers. Obviously, we've had 2 very interesting years since 2019, but based on those numbers, we found that we generate about 500,000 jobs statewide. Those are direct, indirect, and induced impacts. Those jobs generate about $29 billion in personal income. The businesses that move cargo through us make about $122 billion in sales, the cargo that moves through our facilities. And that business generates $3.4 billion annually in federal taxes, $1.7 billion annually, state taxes, and $1.7 billion annually in various local taxes. When we look at our economic impact studies, by and large, generally, you can associate every 10 container units that we move through our facility equals 1 job. So with the growth we've seen the past 2 years, you can, I won't guarantee, but you can pretty much bet that our impacts have grown since this study was undertaken. Savannah is the fastest growing port in the United States. We are the 3rd busiest gateway for ports in the US. Delhi Long Beach Gateway is 2 separate port authorities, both run by cities of Los Angeles and Long Beach. New York, New Jersey is a single port authority. It's a bi-state port authority. And then Savannah is the 3rd busiest out of the entire United States. You see our compounded annual growth rate of 6.6%, exceeds that of any other port in the United States. Our marketing team picked 15 years because that is the one that shows the greatest delta between us and number 2. But if you were to look at 10-year growth or 20-year growth, Savannah would continue to be the fastest growing port in the nation. Now, the past year was a banner year for us. Again, 20% growth on the container side, adding up to 5.3 million TEUs for the year. On the tonnage side, we were up nearly 9%, moving 41.1 million tons between Savannah and Brunswick. Our rail side, our rail operations increased by about 15%, moving nearly 600,000 individual containers in and out of our facility via rail. And while the auto numbers were not a record at 706,000, you see that they increased sharply. Obviously, the previous year was down considerably due to the chip shortage. And of course, people were all locked at home, so they weren't really buying new cars. Hopefully that number continues to increase and we'll see a record, I hope, this year. Tim mentioned this earlier. We are the westernmost port on the East Coast, but I wanted y'all to see this. It's a good representation of the markets that we serve. When you look at how we move our cargo, we're not like at New York where we have 30 million people in our backyard. We've got to get our cargo from our facility to its destination or from its destination to our facility and out. So we are serving the entire southeastern quadrant of the United States. The blue picture or the blue states here represent about 45% of the entire United States population. And they're all within 3 days, via truck or rail from our facilities. Now, I really appreciated a lot of the discussion about the CDL shortage and the drivers' needs. We certainly are seeing a lot of that. As many of you know, we are experiencing a national crisis when it comes to our supply chain. And I want to kind of explain that with the Georgia focus on it. When you look 20 months ago, the beginning of all this, what we experienced was, COVID was breaking out in Asia. Many of the facilities over there that deliver imports or manufacture imports for the United States consumption, they shut down for Chinese New Year, and then they didn't reopen. And immediately, the United States saw a demand issue. COVID came here, April, May. We started to shut down then. We had a supply issue, then we had a demand issue. People couldn't go to the stores to get their stuff. I'm sure each of you had to figure out how to get your groceries when we were all shut in, and all the stuff that went on. About that time, we were, just like you guys, trying to figure out what our budget for next year needed to look like. We budgeted for about a 10% decline. See the numbers going through June and into July, all down. Well, we hit August and saw 12 consecutive months of growth. In fact, of those 12 months, 10 of those months were volume records for the Port Authority for all time, 23% year-over-year growth. What happened was people were stuck at home. E-commerce had figured out how to deliver cargo efficiently to its destination. I don't know about you guys or how many of your constituents figured out how to buy their groceries online. It's something that my family had to figure out how to do. But people started just buying stuff. They couldn't go to restaurants. They couldn't go on vacation. They were sitting at home and they were buying stuff online. So e-commerce pushed forward 10 years in advance of where we expected to be. At the same time, you had retailers restocking for back to school, for holidays, for peak season. And prior to all this, we were in a just-in-time type delivery where people were trying to lean up their inventory as much as possible. Well, now you have people at home buying stuff randomly, and they started to change to a just-in-case type delivery, which meant they needed to refill depleted inventories so that they could go to the warehouse. A lot of that cargo didn't even go to the store itself because people couldn't access the stores at that time. And so there was a big shift in how cargo was delivered and the supply chain and how they thought about the supply chain. So we see a massive increase in cargo volumes, but with that came a massive increase in dwell time on our facilities. So the boxes sat on our facilities longer than what we had previously planned for or experienced. A lot of that was driven or has been driven by a lack of drivers, a lack of chassis and other types of equipment like that, a lack of warehouse workers who cannot unload the boxes quick enough to get it out. And when the warehouses started to back up, cargo started to back up on our facilities, and it starts to compound upon itself. At one point, we had 85,000 containers on our facility. Today, we've got about 83,000. At our peak capacity, at our peak efficiency, we like to have about 61,000 on terminal. So as those things start to back up, the containers sit there longer. We're trying to get them off of our facility, access to drivers, access to chassis, et cetera, create congestion at our ports throughout the nation. And that's what we're seeing right now. So what you're seeing, are you seeing store inventory shortages? Again, the chassis issue and the vessel backlog that you've seen in the news quite a bit. I'm happy to announce that 2 weeks ago we had 27 ships at sea waiting to come in. Last week we had 23. And this Monday, we had 18 ships waiting to come in. So that backlog is declining here in Savannah. Hopefully that number continues to decline. But the backlog in terms of chassis on terminal is still high. What we've done internally is we've expanded our gate hours for truck drivers, allowing truck drivers to come and go, not only from the traditional 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday and the 8 to 5 on Saturday. But we've extended some hours from 7 to 11 at night as well. And so we're seeing some success there. We are accelerating our capacity on terminal with some construction projects. We've had them planned, but we pushed them forward so that we can get that additional capacity on our terminal so that we can store more cargo on our facility. And then, of course, workforce development, something that's always been important to us, but we've been hiring people as fast as we can and seeing a sharp increase in our roles here. One project that we were working on is a project where we hire students straight out of high school. It's called the YES program. We train them on a truck. We train them on a forklift. They come out of high school. They're a full employee making $15 an hour, full benefits. After a year, they graduate from the program. Their pay gets bumped up to $22 or $23 an hour. There's still full benefits. And they also can take advantage of our tuition reimbursement program. So we give them mentors so that they can learn the soft skills that they need to know to be great employees. And the hope is that they stay with us for 50 years and they get to where they want to be in their career. Now, we're also looking at converting a lot of the cargo from truck to rail because of the shortage. You know, Tim mentioned that you can put a lot of boxes onto a train, take a lot of trucks off the road. Our dwell time for rail-bound cargo is shorter right now than our dwell time for truck-bound cargo. So converting that to rail will hopefully get some cargo off of our facility and to its destination quickly. Finding new locations off-site to store those boxes, particularly the ones that are sitting for extended periods of time. And then finding other new ways to speed container pickup at facilities and at terminals. Those are things that we and the entire supply chain are looking at trying to implement. Mentioned the expansion efforts that we've got on our facility. Our capital expenditure plan as part of our budget this year includes $485 million in capital expenditures. Many of those are underway in various stages of completion. The most important one that everyone should know about is SHIP. That's the harbor deepening efforts, which should be done in the first quarter of next year. Thankfully, the Mason Mega Rail will double our capacity for rail on our terminal from 1 million to 2 million container lists per year. And we're excited about that coming online in the next year. Berth 1 will expand our capacity for large ships on our terminal. And so that is underway. I believe that's about 30% complete, probably a year and a half away. And then Garden City West and peak capacity are two projects where we will expand our capacity for container storage at our facility to accommodate that increased demand that we're seeing. Wanted to go through that quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have. And again, I appreciate y'all's time and consideration.
All right. Thank you, Lee. We do have a few questions here. I'll start with number 25. Is that you, Floor Leader Larikia?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. We have a unique situation down at the Brunswick ports, and you may be familiar with this, but I represent Jeff Davis County,
Yes, sir.
Coffee County and Bacon County. And for the members that don't know, we lease that port out to a group called Logistech.
Yes, sir.
We've had some few issues down there, but I think all that's been worked out. The fire marshal, the insurance commissioner, Logistech, and some of the people that use that port. But the problem I have with this Canadian company, Logistech, leasing and managing that port, is they have a contract to allow wood pellets to go down there to put on container ships to ship out, but they are not letting them take wood pellets down there. And they're backlogging a tremendous amount of wood pellets, and then that backlogs the biomass, and the biomass begins to break down. And, you know, there's a lot of things that happen. Could you speak to that any? I apologize. I'm taking this opportunity to sort of bring back this issue, but I'm more concerned about the fact that a Canadian company that's leasing our ports to manage them, we have no more oversight over them than we do.
Yes, sir. I can get you a more extensive update on what's going on. But as I understand it, you know, there was a fire down there, and so requiring us to go work with the insurance commissioner's office and the state fire marshal. They needed to do a full study or investigation on what happened. I know that there's some insurance going on in there as well. I don't have a recent update. I do know that the immediate issue was losing the facility that they were losing. There was not another facility that could take its place immediately. I don't know where they are in terms of plans for rebuilding that facility or what capacities are. I know that they were looking at other buildings on that terminal. But if it's okay with you, sir, I'll get someone to reach out to you and give you an update on where we are with everything. Certainly is a concern. I do know that your constituents move a lot of cargo through that terminal. And it's important to us, just as it is as to that community. Is that?
Yep, that'll work, Lee.
Okay.
He's nodding his head. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Jackson, do you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee, you talked about the workforce at the ports. Is a warehouse worker something like an entry-level job at the ports?
You know, the warehouse workers are actually off of our facility. We don't have a lot of warehouses on our terminal. We do have a couple. But the greater need are at the warehouses that are owned and operated by third-party logistics providers and cargo owners. So I'll pick on a Georgia-based business. Home Depot is a very important customer of ours. They have several warehouses throughout the state. I don't know what their status is with hiring warehouse workers, but I do know that they have several that require people to unload the boxes as they come in. And if they are having issues with hiring people, then obviously they can't unload them as fast as they need to. With the growth of business and demand for products moving through our facilities, you know, they're all fighting for the same group of people in the communities that they're located. And so it's, if they lose one person, it's because another facility has taken that person. Warehouse workers are, and there's some facilities, some warehouse facilities that require a higher level of technological expertise. A forklift today is nothing like a forklift from 30 years ago. And so that forklift operator training is something that could put or set a warehouse worker ahead of others when they're looking for a job. It is I want to say a lower level, but it's an entry level position. But there's obviously a lot of opportunity for folks to move up. And these warehouses do want people very badly. If they show up regularly, I do know from the warehouses that I've talked to that they will bump their pay up very quickly if they just show up to work on time and do a good job.
Thank you.
Sir.
Quick follow-up on that, Lee. So a lot of our delays then, are they because the private sector doesn't have the workforce to unload those containers to allow you to transition from ship to on the ground to on the rail or on the truck to the final destination? Not that we're having, we don't have room per se, but
It's a little
Right.
bit of everything. That's part of it. It's a big part of it. Access to truck drivers is a big part of it. And we already covered the truck driver issue with insurance and the federal laws and all that stuff. So yes, that is part of it, Mr. Chairman. Equipment is an issue, access to chassis for the truck drivers who can work. Because the boxes are sitting in a warehouse on wheels, you can't take that chassis back to the port to get another box or take it to the port with a loaded box because they're just sitting there parked at the warehouse waiting to be unloaded. So access to that equipment becomes difficult. And then as ports fill up, as warehouses fill up with inventory inside the warehouse, they don't have any place to put the additional cart. So until it moves out or until it sells, it's got to sit there and wait as well. And so it's compounding upon itself. I do know that there's a significant amount of warehouse space being constructed in Georgia, particularly in our area. And so we are eager to see that come online. And then just the sheer volume increases that we've seen and other ports have seen is also a bit of an impact on this as well.
Okay. Got a few more here.
Yes, sir.
Representative Williams. No, Williams, I'm sorry.
Thank you. My esteemed colleague can go after me. Lee, with the investment that the state has made in the heart of Georgia rail line, one would think that our inland port in Cordell would be going gangbusters. But seems to me like we've become a glorified trucking company versus rail. Can you give me some insight into that or how we can improve that?
Yes, sir. That's a facility that we worked with quite a bit. We marketed with them as well. Their biggest issue is access into our facility. The rail into our facility is not owned by the state. Getting them close to our facility works, but the numbers, the financials just didn't work in their favor. They didn't have the volume that they needed to make it work. Obviously, they have exports there. Finding a major importer to help bring that paying box back became difficult. And so hopefully we can help them find something so that it will begin to work again. But as of right now, the financials just didn't make any sense. I can try and get you some more info on that as well. I have not gotten an update on Cordell in a little while. But I'll get that as well for you.
We couldn't put any pressure on those rails to get the product shipped to the Port of Savannah. We couldn't talk to them a little bit.
I'm not sure how that works. I'll have to talk to our folks about how that works. That would be privately owned lines. And we can't really dictate how they, how they work or how they operate on those.
Thank you.
Sir.
Representative Al Williams.
Thank you. Brother Leo, how's the weather at home?
It is nice. It's much nicer than it was this weekend. It was freezing.
All right, sir. Quick question. Well, first, I'm glad that you were able to clarify something that has become sort of a misnomer in Georgia, that all the problems at the port are because you can't hire workers. It goes much deeper, much more complicated. And what bothers me is drivers who have long waits of hours, literally, to pick up a load, and they're paid by the loads they move.
Yes, sir.
And then we couple that with unbelievable high fuel costs. I just need an idea, if you're able to give, when are we going to get the backlog? You've run out or running out of storage space. You got 18 ships in the harbor. What's the light at the end of the tunnel? Because the supply chain jam now is a nightmare.
Yes, sir. We're looking at ways to move some of these boxes off of our terminal, get them closer to their ultimate destination. Whether that be at our inland port up in Northwest Georgia, or other spaces, and try and find a way to get them there so that instead of storing them here, they can store them closer to their ultimate destination. That will then hopefully free up the chassis that these drivers rely upon, access to these chassis that they rely upon. And, for those boxes that are being, stored elsewhere, the driver picking up and dropping off is a local dray as opposed to a long distance dray. So that allows them to move more and stay and sleep at home at their home at night. So hopefully that will help somewhat. It is going to take a little bit of time for everything to normalize. I don't have a crystal ball that'll tell me exactly when. I do know that on our facility, our turn times for our drivers is not where we want it to be, but it's not far off. For a one-way move, a driver in or out of our facility is in and out in about 41 minutes. Our goal is 35. For a two-way move, which is dropping off a box and picking up a box, their average turn time is 63 minutes. Our goal is 60 minutes for those drivers. Now, when they go out to their destination, whether it's a warehouse or a manufacturing facility or farm, I don't know how long they're waiting at those locations and what those delays are. But on our facility, our operations, despite the additional boxes on terminal, has been fairly good. You are correct. The gas prices have gone up. The diesel prices have gone up. Turn times are difficult. And I don't know when the end is going to be coming. Now, an expansion of available hours that they're allowed to drive certainly is helpful. In Georgia, we've had that. But that is only in Georgia. For cargo going outside of our state, that's not something that our state can control. And so that might be something that would help the drivers. Drivers are, like you said, getting paid per move. And so the more moves they make, the more money they take home to their family. And if they're being delayed, then that means less food on the table for those drivers. So we want them to be happy and their kids to be fed and get them where they need to be in terms of making money, because everyone relies on those drivers to get that cargo. As Chairman Perkle said, everything in that room you're sitting in was delivered by a truck. You can imagine how much those trucks impact our daily lives.
Lee, final question. When y'all talk about TEUs, is that in and out or just in?
In and out. In and
Okay.
out. Now, there has been a sharp increase in imports. So our import numbers are higher in terms of percentage than they normally are. But our export numbers are still good. And as the inventories are filled, I expect to see that percentage go back closer to 50-50 where it normally is.
And is that some of that impacted by the fact that those empty containers are not getting emptied? So maybe there's not other stuff going back in them to.
That's
get
part
back,
of it.
or-
Yes, sir. Another part of it is the spot rates and the demand for an empty box to go back to Asia to get filled. And so that's normalizing right now. It's not where it was before, but it will get back to closer to where it was before, which will help.
Okay, good deal. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate the information.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for your time.
All right, see you.
See you.
All right, next up, we've got Scott Griffin. Come on down.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, appreciate y'all having me here this afternoon to speak to you and give you an update on our timber harvest notification. House Bill 897 was effective July 2020, and I do have this presentation. Do they have copies of this? Okay. Okay. So House Bill 897 took effect July 2020, and there's quite several things in that bill that we've already enacted. Those were, you know, you can see there in the copy of your presentation where, you know, we added some language where the counties couldn't go beyond 12.624, a little stronger language, better define where the bond could be used, those sort of things. And we worked with ACCG ACCG took that and put it in a sample ordinance that went to the counties. So the counties have that at their disposal at this point. So some of them have adopted that, some probably have not. But the main thing I wanted to give you an update on today was where we were with the statewide timber harvest notification website. And that was part of House Bill 897. It gave the Georgia Forestry Commission the authority to develop this statewide website for timber harvest notification. And kind of the goal behind this and the driver behind this was to establish more uniformity amongst the counties with timber harvest notification. So if we develop this website, then it will make a more uniform way for them to do that. So the actual website itself is ArcGIS platform. We're using Arc Online as well as Survey 123 to take those notifications and then distribute those to the county. So basically the way the website is going to work just in general is it is going to, the harvester will go into the website, enter a timber harvest notification that they used to have to go down to the county and file that with county personnel. They're going to go to our website and enter that in. And then the county itself will develop an email group. So they'll have like a manual county timber harvest at whatever.com. So they control their group. So Emmanuel County, for example, will have, you know, they may have their county manager, their roads manager, and their tax commissioner as part of their group. And they get an email that says a notification's been filed. They also get a link to a Google map they can click on, and it takes them to a map on Google that shows them where's that timber harvest is taking place. Right now, we're in the middle of a pilot project trying out this website. We've been doing this since January 1st. ACCG again has been working with us on that. We selected some pilot counties. We've added some more counties to that throughout this process. It kind of started out slow, but it's picked up momentum here in the end. But our current counties are Morgan, Upson, Emmanuel, Jones, Sumter, Pierce, and Clinch counties that have been trying this system out. It's resulted in several changes. Our pilot has. We've added some improved security. So what we did there, we had some issue of, you know, we didn't want that statewide timber harvest data to be easily accessible. So we've added some security where the timber harvester actually has to create an ArcGIS online account. And then once they have their account, username, password, then they're the only ones that can see their data. So that was a change we've made. We've made some tweaks on actual data collection. For example, some county feedback we got was, you know, the maps, the timber harvesters required to enter in all their timber harvest information, such as landowner and that sort of thing. And then they were required to upload a map with the ingress egress marked on the map, because the county's concerned about, you know, where are they coming on and off the county road, because they want to make sure that the loggers are not damaging the road. So we were having problems with loggers turning in an adequate map. So we actually added a field where the logger puts in the name of the road. It just says, put the name of the road at the point of ingress egress in the actual website. So we're not as dependent on a map as we once were. You can see on the slide there, there is a link to the actual website. You can go there, but it's not going to really show you a whole lot until you create an account. And you have to create that account to be able to function with that. Rollout strategy on how we're going to roll this thing out. Like I said, we've been in a pilot for going on almost a year now. So we're thinking in late November, we're going to have a sort of an official hosting of a platform to collect feedback from our harvesters and our county and our pilot counties. And we've been getting that all along, but we're going to just have a pause and just ask for comments, and we'll see what we get there. We'll make some changes. ACCG is going to help us in mid-December. We're going to host a webinar with all the counties in Georgia prior to this rollout. And we're going to explain to them kind of how the website works, you know, how they interact with it, just have an informational meeting with the counties to sort of give them a heads up that, hey, the announcement from the state forester is coming and that this website is going to be available. January, we're thinking January, or at least sometime in early 2022, we're going to roll this thing out. And the way the legislation reads, it says that the state forester will announce the website is completed and available for use by the counties. And then it's voluntary for a certain period of time, no longer than 18 months. And then it becomes mandatory. If a county requires notification, they must use the website to obtain those notifications. So we have that announcement coming from our state forester, probably January or early 2022. And then we plan a meeting after that with harvesters and those stakeholders who support those harvesters to introduce them to the system and, you know, tell them how that's going to work for them. The next slide is costs and challenges with this. We have incurred some costs associated with the web platform because we are using ArcGIS online, and we're using ArcHub there to actually manage all the entries and the data. And then there's an account, every time somebody creates an account, you can pay, I think it's $10,000 for 1,000 accounts. And then when you add more, it's an additional charge. So we're not sure how many accounts we're going to be working with, but you know, we're encouraging the companies to create one account for their company, and then I'll just share the username and password with their timber buyers or whomever and allow them to make those entries. So we're looking at about $11,500 cost right now associated with this statewide website. Staffing to run the website is a little bit of a challenge. We have 2 GIS specialists at the Georgia Forestry Commission. You know, we're designing this thing to where it's going to be as easy on the Forestry Commission to run and not require us to work on this daily. But we are seeing that there is some need for daily maintenance of the site because they actually have to request permission. They create a user account and then they request permission from the Forestry Commission to be able to access the system. And we did that to control the access. We didn't want, you know, through our trial, our pilot, we've had, you know, somebody goes on and they try to create an account. They think it messes up and they create another one and they got 3 accounts before you know it. So we're trying to manage that. There's customer support with the counties and harvesters. We created a timber harvest email that we've got 3 people that's going to be working on that to help answer those questions as they come in. And then system upgrades, you know, those are some things that's going to require some staff there as well. So, you know, as far as we could probably use another GIS specialist to be able to assist with that. It's kind of where I was headed with that, but that's not the point of me being here today, is to speak to that. But, you know, I think that was part of the call, was to bring up any kind of cost or challenges that we were facing. So that's a quick overview. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got 1 or 2, but
Okay.
I guess for the committee, this was a bill that was completed by the council. One of our initiatives to just make life easier for the loggers, where
Right.
they wouldn't have to physically go down and do in-person filings or whatever,
Right.
whatever they have to do on these tracts of land and just to kind of keep up with things.
Yep.
So,
And that's been well received so far. We've gotten great feedback for, even from counties. We have counties, we've had 2 counties called that they want to go ahead and get started. with it.
saves them
So
and
that's a good
saves,
sign.
yeah,
It does.
everybody.
It
It's
saves both.
win-win.
Yes, sir.
Good deal, good deal. The GIS specialist, do you know, you don't know what that salary, is that a full-time position? That's all they do, or?
Yeah, that's all they do. They support our, our protection, forest protection needs, forest management needs, any of that going on within the state. So,
Okay.
that's probably a $40,000 position, something like that.
Okay. All right. I don't see any questions. Scott, thank you for the
All right.
update and glad to hear that everything's working well and y'all are getting off the ground
Okay.
and going. So
Appreciate the
thank
work
you.
of the council on that. It's going to be a good move for everybody, I believe. So thanks.
All right. Thank you. Good deal. All righty. If y'all hold on just a little bit longer, apologize for running late, but now we're going to talk about truck weights. Meg, you've been very patient along with many other people. So come on down and be fast.
Certainly, if people have more detailed questions or want me to follow up later, I'll be happy to meet with anybody. As Chairman Jaspers knows, I can talk about this for a while. In fact, you could probably give this presentation at this point.
If you want to get started on.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started while he's getting the slides ready to go. So thank you so much, Chairman Jaspers, Chairman Watson, for allowing me to come today and discuss the condition of Georgia's roads and bridges and the impacts of truck weights. I'll cover our state bridges first, reviewing conditions, how we inspect the bridges and how we design them. Then I'll discuss pavement conditions and how we design pavements for truck weights. And I'll take a little bit of time to talk about current weight limits, but I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did the other day. So this is a look at Georgia's bridges. Less than 1% of state-owned bridges are posted or load restricted. About 28% of locally owned bridges are posted or load restricted. So we have 14,700 plus structures and we inspect them all every 2 years per federal law. We provide this inspection service to the local governments as well. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay. In the last 5 years, we've spent over $1 billion replacing bridges. About 155 of those were locally owned structures and and we've spent over half of that money on locally owned structures as well. We consider all of our bridges very important assets in the state. So when we say a bridge is load restricted or posted, it doesn't mean that it is unsafe or that it's about to collapse. It means it has maintenance issues that require repair or replacement to address the deficiencies. So to remain open to traffic, a deficient bridge must be posted with a sign with a reduced weight limit that restricts the gross weight of the vehicles using that bridge. I want to be very clear that if a bridge is unsafe, we close it, or we require the local government to close it. So this is Georgia's bridge conditions. For locally owned bridges, which are a subset of the non-national highway system, about 6% of those are considered in poor condition. But generally, bridges in Georgia, we do a good job of taking care of our bridges. And this is up to date as of November 1st. This map shows the current bridges that are load restricted for tractor trailers at 80,000 pounds or more. The black dots are closed bridges. So you can see that even though a bridge can be in pretty fair condition, it can still be load restricted. So for the 1,450 structures we have that are posted and need to be repaired or replaced, this number is not static. It changes every day because we are inspecting bridges every day. And as things are updated, we immediately take action as needed. So what determines why a bridge is posted with load restrictions? Load ratings are based on the original bridge design, and it's adjusted for the deterioration of the bridge on the biannual inspection. So load restrictions posted are based on the state's legal loads for trucks. So just to give perspective, this slide shows the additional dots in red shows the additional bridges that would be posted if the legal limit were 100,000-pound tractor trailers. This was a bill proposed last year. That's why I have this slide. But just for perspective, this is about 1,464 additional bridges. If we were to raise weight limits to 88,000 pounds, it would be an additional 653 bridges. If it were 90,000 pounds, it'd be an additional 749 bridges. So either way, we know how many bridges would be posted if the weight limits were raised. And this is fact. This is based on the conditions of the bridges that we have right now in our system. We have a very rigorous database. So it's not speculation. This is an absolute known. So since the passage of the Transportation Funding Act of 2015, we've invested a lot of money in Georgia's bridges, and we've made some headway in replacing our older bridges. But here, what you see is that for every bridge we replace, there are several more that have reached their design life of 50 years. The average bridge age in Georgia is 42.6 years. We take good care of our state route bridges in Georgia because good maintenance allows us to maximize that bridge life. But bridge maintenance doesn't restore a bridge to brand new or doesn't restore it to its original strength. But even with good maintenance, bridges that have reached their useful life need to be replaced. Increasing the loads on these bridges only accelerates their deterioration, and eventually the fatigue will prevail. So this is what bridges are designed for. Since 1944, these are the design trucks, and they are a theoretical. They're meant to be representative of a typical truck envelope. The smaller truck, that what we call the H15, and the larger truck, the HS20. So the HS20 is supposed to represent the typical tractor trailer. And bridges designed in the 70s and earlier were designed for less stress because they considered what traffic would be using those roads, and many times they would design for the smaller truck. In the 1970s, GDOT saw that the cost savings really didn't justify the lighter loads. So GDOT started using the heavier trucks to design all of our bridge replacements, even those on local system. So if a local government designs their own bridge, they may choose to design for the lighter load, but we always design for the heavier load. So when it comes to bridges, the number of axles is irrelevant unless you consider the gross weight and the length of the vehicle. The impact of the load is like a sledgehammer blow as the truck crosses the bridge, and the heavier the truck, the harder the blow. Congress enacted the bridge formula in 1975 to limit the weight to length ratio of a vehicle crossing a bridge. It's to protect the bridges. And you can see in the top figure, the stress on a bridge members as a longer truck rolls across is less than that caused by the short vehicle shown in the lower figure. Are the slides not up? Can they not see them? But they have the, okay. I'm sorry about that. I'll try, okay, no problem. So the weight of the longer truck is spread out while the shorter vehicle is concentrated in a smaller area. So the short, stout, heavy trucks do a number on our bridges. They're much harder on the bridges than the longer trucks. So looking at the bridges we have in Georgia, we can see that 31% of local bridges were designed for the smaller truck, the H15. We also have about 19.6% of bridges, which we don't know what they were designed for, and those are on local system. We're very familiar with what's on the state system. So that's almost 50% of local bridges were probably designed for the lighter trucks. But you can see that as bridges were built over the last 70 to 100 years, they were always designed for something different. So there's no uniform way to say that all the bridges can handle one thing or another. Plus, they're all different ages and they've had different stresses. When we talk about stress on a bridge, we're talking about the deflection that happens when the truck hits the bridge. If you hold a ruler between your fingers and press down in the middle, it'll bend. If you bang on it with a hammer, it might break. So it's just, the bridge is designed to flex some, but it can only handle so much stress and so many times. So you can see here on the graph with the design load versus truck load that the heavier trucks are higher, the line is higher than the design trucks that are listed in the gray line and the green line. And so it just shows that the flexing, it puts additional stress on the bridge that it was not designed to handle. And that's why the number of bridges posted increases when we increase the weights. So now let's talk a minute about pavements. So the graph on slide 14 shows just the recent condition of pavements in Georgia. We do a pretty good job taking care of our pavements in Georgia. I don't have information on local pavements. This is only state routes, just so you know. We maintain about 17,800 centerline miles in Georgia, and about 107,000 centerline miles are maintained by local governments. We inspect all of our state-owned pavements every year. So, and this allows us to track the damage and track it in relation to what kind of traffic is on that road, as well as where the road is and how it reacts to different climate or environmental changes. So we keep a good surface course on our pavements. It's almost like painting a house. You don't wait till the paint is peeling to go paint your house. You try to keep a good layer of paint on the house, and that protects it from water. That's exactly what asphalt does on a road. We try to keep it resurfaced, try to keep it from cracking up too much, because we want to keep a good surface on there that protects it from water getting in and under the road. On the next slide, you can see the flexible pavement design that shows the different layers that we design in a pavement structure. And 95% of Georgia's pavements are asphalt. So that's what I'm going to focus on, is the flexible pavement. And the design for a road really is based on where it is, because the soil underneath is a big part of that structure. So if South Georgia soil is very different from Atlanta soil, North Georgia soil, and also what traffic is projected to use that roadway. We do traffic projections about 20 years out, and that's what we design for. Just keep in mind that local roads most likely are not going to have all these layers. Many times they're going to be a road that was one time gravel and then tar and gravel and then probably asphalt on top of that. So they're not designed with a structure for weight. When the wheel rolls over the pavement, you can see on the left, the flexible pavement, how the stress goes down into the sub base and the base of the pavement. The goal is that you don't want the weight of the truck to go into the subgrade. That is when the pavement will start to break up and show extreme damage. When we design pavements, we design for an equivalent single axle load. And multi-unit trucks already represent a large part of our pavement design. And this is on slide 18, thickness on state routes. We already build in a 1.5 times more pavement to handle the current legal load of 80,000 pounds. So increased vehicle loads will deteriorate our existing pavements faster than already accounted for and require an increase in maintenance funds. In addition, the damage from increased loads can cause the pavement to crack and fail from the bottom up, which requires more reconstruction rather than resurfacing. There are some research papers out there about the impacts of truck weights on pavements. Neither of these were done in Georgia. One's South Carolina, one's Texas, both done for FHWA. And I'll just let those quotes stand on their own. I won't read them to you. So a little bit about weight limits. So the legal weight limit in Georgia is 80,000 pounds. There are commodities that have additional loads per axle and tandem that are shown here, up to 5% variance per axle. We also, I took out the slide that had this on there, but I do want to mention that non-divisible containerized freight originating or destined for the port can also be up to 100,000 pounds. Freight that actually approaches that weight is less than 1% of the containers coming to and from the port. The size and the structure of the container tends to limit that weight itself. So there aren't that many that actually reach that weight. You can see in Georgia, the legal loads on a single axle. Here it's compared to our neighboring states and the federal legal limit of 20,000 pounds per axle. In Georgia, we already have, with our special exemptions, additional weight allowed if you're hauling those products and commodities, which are higher than all of our neighboring states. And this scale variance allows to accommodate most vehicles originating from a mill or field or quarry without knowing the exact weight that's in the truck. There is a little variance there to allow them to fill that truck. For tandem axles, again, with our special exemptions and our variants, Georgia has a very generous legal load per axle in its exemptions plus variants. And Georgia law is already the highest tandem weight of all of our neighboring states. So this current tandem weight is what is driving 75% of our current load restrictions on bridges. So to summarize, increased weight limits will accelerate deterioration on pavements and bridges and will result in additional bridge limit posting, and also will increase damage to pavements and will greatly impact local roads and bridges. Y'all had also asked about our recent short line improvements based on the bond funds you've provided. I have details in the slides on every rail, all 6 rail lines, and how the money's, how much we've spent and how much of that rail line is up to the 286K standard. I'm happy to go through that, or if you'd rather just have that information and read it, whatever suits you.
We'll just review it.
Okay,
Appreciate you putting it in here. I see it now.
absolutely.
Yep. All right. Any questions? Got a slim crowd up here, Meg.
I scared him away.
Mr. Chairman Dickey.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm kind of intrigued, and I don't want to take a lot of time, about the relationship between local bridges, state bridges,
Sure.
how y'all fund local bridges and do all the inspection and things quickly.
Sure. So we inspect all bridges in the state, local or state. It's just part of our bridge inspection budget, which total is about $8 million a year. For funding local replacements, we prioritize them just like we do all of our other bridge projects. We look at the condition, we look at the volumes of traffic on that bridge, we look at the type of special vehicles that might be using that bridge, like hospital buses, things like that, where it is in location to other routes, other detour routes. And when we fund a locally owned bridge, we notify the local government that your bridge is on our list for replacement. And we ask them to fund a small amount of the right-of-way acquisition, which right-of-way for a bridge replacement is usually a pretty small amount anyway. So we ask them to fund about 50% or less. We have had local governments tell us they can't do it at all. I mean, we work with them. And then we replace the bridge. It usually takes 3 to 5 years to design the bridge, do the right-of-way acquisition, and then let it for construction. But I'd say about half our program is locally owned bridges, what we spend every year on bridges.
Anybody else? All right, I think that's
Thanks.
it, Meg. Thank you
right.
for that presentation. All right, next up, we've got Georgia Forestry Commission. Association, I'm sorry.
Association. Yes, sir. It'll come to a shock to some of y'all that I'm not Chad Nimmer, but I'm humbled and honored that you guys have us here to present to you and talk to you a little bit and provide a little bit more context around the crisis position that our logging sector is facing right now. My name is Matt Hested, and I'm the Vice President of Engagement for the Georgia Forestry Association. And I have the pleasure of telling our members' stories every day. And what that looks like is a logging sector that represents about 1,000 companies across the state, 179 manufacturing facilities across the state, and about 150,000 landowners who are kind of in that merchantable class of timber. Those individuals support an industry that is the second largest in terms of wages and salaries in the state, and puts Georgia in the #1 forestry state in the nation. So it's a big industry, and it's no new matter to everyone on this committee, so I won't go into any detail there. I do have the opportunity to talk to a lot of our members about the challenges that they're facing, and more with our logging sector. what I'm hearing is the terminology that it is a crisis, and they're using that word pretty seriously. And that translates to kind of three primary factors. And I want to go a little deeper into those factors, but first, just highlight two kind of key takeaways from this. The logging sector in Georgia has been kind of the tip of the spear with logistics issues in the state. We're kind of taking the brunt of a lot of the economic factors that are leading to some of the things that have already been talked about today. But they are all able to be solved in part or in whole through legislative action. And I'll talk a little bit more in depth about each of those things. And Blake, I guess everybody has printouts. So we'll go into kind of the three core issues here. So labor, we've already heard about the shortage of drivers today, and I think that's well defined. Our sector is unique in the instance because commercial driving is drivers are experiencing shortages. It's become a more enticing job for some of our more experienced log truckers who want to take advantage of some of those baseball level signing bonuses that were mentioned earlier, to, big time paychecks. So that has been certainly an issue with folks leaving the job. The increased demand for drivers has increased average pay by 50 to 65%, which is a big issue. Insurance, in addition, insurance rates are running 8 to 10 times higher than what they were 5 years ago. Just as an example from one of our members, log truck rates have gone from about $2,500 per truck to $20,000 to $30,000 per truck, and that's a huge increase. And Georgia has some of the highest insurance rates in the Southeast as well, and there's a number of factors there. I just want to pause right there and make one statement. The increases in insurance costs and the shortage of labor has essentially erased the profitability of the log trucking sector, and it's caused many folks to go out of business, quite frankly, and those bigger haulers to just kind of be tighter with their margins, and at the end of the day, put more and more pressure on our mills. It's a big deal for Georgia. We move about 2 million truckloads of timber a year from private forest land to mills, and that's more than any other state in the country, and that's part of what makes us the #1 forestry state in the nation. Moving on to weights, Georgia has some of the lowest truck weights for log trucks than any other state in the South. We're at a competitive disadvantage, I think, with our surrounding states, and businesses that have to hop across that border from time to time are in bad shape because they're at a competitive disadvantage there. So what does this mean? The problems impacting forestry today are problems that will bleed into the greater trucking industry in the future. We already see this with labor and weights. States around us are getting more and more competitive by increasing weights, implementing driver training programs, and creating state-backed insurance pools. And we are putting our position as the #1 forestry state in the nation at risk if we choose to do nothing. As we noted before, safety and road maintenance gains
can be generated by increasing log truck weights. And so that will be an important thing. And I'll leave you with some final thoughts because I know we're running short on time. While weights are important to the forestry and agriculture industries, the loaded weight of a truck doesn't matter if you don't have a driver and you can't insure that truck. So those two issues are critical to kind of addressing the crisis that our industry's facing. A few suggestions from policy perspective. We think increasing truck weights to 90,000 pounds to match our neighboring states would be a great step forward. Second, we support efforts to create log truck driving workforce programs that namely allow us to attract new drivers into the sector. We're not trying to poach drivers from other industries. We want to get more new drivers into the industry. Third, aligning workforce programs with insurance requirements. And I think that's been talked about well today already. And then finally, exploring state-sponsored high-risk insurance pools like those that have been established in other states. So I'll pause there and take any questions.
All right, I got a quick, and I don't, this may not be for you or not, but you may have some insight on it. As far as insurance goes, when there's a violation, does it stay with the driver or the owner of the equipment?
I'd have to ask to be sure, but I think it stays with the driver.
Okay. All right. Any other?
I can get you a more defined answer. on
Chairman
that.
Jeff?
Just real quick on that reinsurance, you've got on this slide here. Have you seen any other state do that? What's your?
The insurance pool?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the North Carolina actually, there's an interesting statistic. They have a high risk insurance pool that's kind of managed by the state. And their insurance rates for log trucks, we did a study with the University of Georgia on this, and their insurance rates for log trucks are about 94% less than ours, which is pretty impressive. And so what that allows, I'm not an insurance expert, but what that allows insurers to do is they can cede the risk for kind of high risk individuals or, folks Representative Watson that are in repeated wrecks, but they're still insured. So they cede the risk to the pool, and then the pool pays based on how many insurers they have. So, and we can get you more details.
Yeah, we need to go ahead and move on, but we should share that study that you've seen with us.
Yes, sir.
Take a look at.
And just to follow up, and this may be more for Meg, but just looking at this map that they've provided, when our neighbors are a little bit more than we are. I guess, did we just come up with that number, or did they just come up with that number? Or what's what's the difference when you're doing the math between 84,000 and 90,000 in South Carolina? And
So the difference, he's showing you the gross weight, and what I showed you is what's allowed per axle. So even though they have a higher gross weight, they still allow less per axle.
okay, gotcha.
I had a few more slides when I presented last week to the transportation committee that did show those totals as well. So sorry if I took out the look.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Megan, are we working on a study for triple axles, different axle configuration for log trucks? Didn't I hear that last year, Matt? Or is that out there?
It is an option. We did present that in the last legislative session, the 6-axle configuration that would increase the allowable haul weight to 100,000 pounds. We've done some research, initial research, and research has been done in other states on how that distributes the weight across the truck. And it's actually less per axle. And that kind of gets into physics, which is out of my department, but it is an interesting thing to explore for our industry.
Keep in mind that the total truck weight is what's important for the bridges. The axle weight is what's more important for the pavements.
All right. Anybody else? All righty. Well, appreciate that
Thanks, sir.
presentation and thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
We'll tell Chad you did a much better job than he probably would have. Next up, we've got Jimmy Cotty. Come on, Jimmy. All right, go for it.
Chairman Watson, Chairman Jaspers, appreciate you having me in today to talk about trucking and truck weights. My name's Jimmy Cotty. I'm with the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete Association. I'm going to preface my remarks. I'm going to touch on a few of the things that I've heard thus far, and then I'll tell you a little bit about our specific interest in truck weights, and I'll speak specifically to ready mix concrete, but also a little more broadly, just general construction materials, sand, aggregate, asphalt, and the such. So again, I'm with the Georgia Ready Mix Concrete Association. When we talk about trucking, I said this last week in the Transportation Committee meeting. Trucking is often regulated kind of on a one size fits all basis. So a lot of the same regulations and requirements and weights and all that kind of stuff are applied on the same basis, but not all trucking applications are the same. So in our sector of the industry, it's largely what's called a tandem axle. So you got a steer axle on the front, you got two on the rear, that style of truck, not tractor trailers. And most of our delivery is local in the ready mix concrete business. I mean, generally they're under 20 miles one way from their plant of origin. So it's a very localized business. And even the material hauling as such, hauling cement and crushed aggregate and whatnot is very localized as well. As we're talking about trucking, I would agree that safety should be our number one priority when we're looking at these kind of issues. And certainly consideration for the infrastructure is a legitimate concern as well. But I think if any industries can show that they can operate safely with respect to the equipment that they have, that it can haul it effectively, correctly, safely, that certainly it should be a look from the legislature to possibly expand what they can and can't do. So what's the primary issue here? So for us, we look at weights as an opportunity to maximize our existing equipment's efficiency. So, and dealing with the business reality of a depleted driver pool. I mean, those are the two main things. Touching on the maximization of equipment, trucks built today are built much differently than they were 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. The way that they're spec'd, we had a representative from Mack Trucks in here last week just to talk a little bit about some of the safety technology that frankly, when last time we sort of took a close look at truck weights, didn't exist. And now they're braking systems that were not around then, anti-lock brakes to handle stoppages or mandated stoppages of full payloads. Equipment inside the cab, monitoring drivers, watching if there are cameras that can tell if they're nodding off, if their head moves out of a certain zone, if you will, while they're driving. Rollover prevention, steer corrections, a lot of the safety bells and whistles that we see in our passenger vehicles, those are more rapidly coming online with commercial trucking as well. So we have all of that at our disposal to be safe. And trucking companies, they have to be safe, right? I mean, being safe is good for business. One accident can put you out of business. So nobody wants to operate unsafely, if you will. So, and touching on some of the other issues that we've heard, what are the issues affecting us? I mean, we just heard it from the Forestry Association, labor and insurance. I mean, if you talk to any business owner in ready mix concrete, they're going to tell you they're most concerned about where they're going to find their drivers. That's our biggest labor pool, and how much it's going to cost to insure. You know, we've been dealing with the issue of the 2 years of experience that we've heard about. That's been a common theme for a long time for us. Not only we have a specialized piece of equipment, we have a truck with a liquid load that's got a spinning drum on it. It's got a higher center of gravity. So certainly any insurance company is going to look at new drivers and less experienced drivers as a much higher risk in that situation as well. So the cost of insurance continues to go up, and finding drivers, training drivers. We've talked a little bit about that. You know, I know some of our guys have looked at some of the things that DDS offers in terms of third-party driver training and education. I'm not sure how widespread that use is, but for some of our larger companies that have the wherewithal to be able to do their own internal driver schools, they can bring guys in, they can train them, they can put them in, they can help them get their license, and then they can put them in a truck. For some of our smaller companies, they don't. So what they do is a lot of times they might make a deal where Chairman Watson knocks on my door and he says, "I'd like to drive a truck for you potentially, or do you have a job?" And we say, "Well, we'll pay for your CDL, and you're going to go down the street here to Chairman Jasper's driving school." Well, by the time you go to school there and you've gone through the program, somebody else has come in and recruited you away, and I've just paid for a CDL now that somebody else is hiring you on to provide work for them. So guys tell me to the ability they could get a driver in their door and work with them on site in an effort to get their CDL would be advantageous. It can help them build some company loyalty and try to keep them with their business for the long term. So just touching on a few of those. So let's talk about weights for a few minutes. So in Georgia, with the types of materials we're talking about, we're not talking about weights of 90,000, 80,000 pounds. We're talking about weights, you know, in the mid 60s to low 70s, potentially up to 80K. Nothing that our industry sector is looking for that would be beneficial to us would put us in excess of the 80,000 pound state gross weight limit that the DOT talked about earlier. We have 3 weight classifications here in Georgia we have to adhere to. We have interstate weights that we can't exceed. So we're unable to use the interstate highway, even though it's built to a very high standard. We can't access that. We can use state and non-interstate federal routes to make deliveries. So any road that's not a local road, but is not interstate, is permissible to use with the various tolerances and weight exemptions that DOT alluded to earlier. So in our world, we look at that as a 69,000 pound gross weight, and with 5% for being under the 100 air mile radius from the plan of origin. So, and then you have county roads. And so we do use county roads. State law allows us to make a delivery or a pickup on a county road with a full payload, but it doesn't permit us to drive crisscross shortcuts all over county roads throughout the state. If we're making a delivery on a county road, we're obligated to take a state route to the shortest point of a county road to go make that delivery. So if a county road's between, you got a county road with a state route kind of looping around, you've got to get to that county road from whichever side is closest to where you're making your drop off, or else, as many of our drivers know, motor carrier compliance will issue you a ticket quickly, or local government. So, so those are the 3 different weight laws when folks are routing our trucks. So obviously we're here to talk about the state, non-interstate, federal routes. You know, in our world, with the 69,000 pound for a ready-mix concrete truck, if you didn't change weight laws today and just said eliminate the per axle limitation, that would get our guys to where they can fill their drum. It's commonplace to have an 11-yard drum on the back, fill it to 10 yards, and that would maximize efficiency for a ready-mix producer delivering a load of concrete. Right now, guys are in that 9.5 yard range. When you start talking about hauling aggregate in tandem axle dump trucks, you know, we would, one thing that the state has done many years ago is they eliminated the ability for use of a lift axle. Now, a lift axle is not illegal in Georgia. You just can't use a lift axle for the purpose of determining your weight your payload for weight. So what most states do is they allow for the lift axle. It's either on the front of the tandem there, where it can be dropped down, or in the concrete world, they have what's called a bridge master or pusher axle, which is something that will actually lay down from the back of the truck. In either event, it's there to help distribute the payload. And so in those cases, we'd be talking about or looking for roughly with allow use of a lift axle to get upwards to 80,000 pounds on a full payload. We talked a little bit about safety technology. I think DOT touched on pavements a little bit, and I'll just say that they take a long look at pavements, and like the chief engineer was saying, they determine how busy is it going to be, what kind of traffic are they expecting, and I think if you've got hot spots that are causing you problems, repeatedly, and trucks are part of that equation. We would encourage you to take a look at something different, whether it's different materials or a different design for whatever you're using, instead of wash, rinse, repeat. We touched on training. And I really think I'd be happy to take any questions from the committee if you have any.
Questions? What number are you? All right.
Know very little about the trucking business, but just an observation, I've noticed that a lot of the larger trucks now have 2-wheel axles instead of 4, which are more traditional. Does that make a difference on the pavement? And this may be a question for the DOT. I'm not sure, but you know what I'm saying? Instead of,
you're talking about on the axle itself having
one
on each side instead of 2 on each side.
Exactly.
I mean, I'll defer to the engineer in the room, but more wheels should help. Now, a truck, when they build that, is rated appropriately, right? So when you're speccing a truck at the factory, like the gentleman from Mac told us last week, if you want to haul a certain payload and they start building that truck, well, they're going to configure the axles and wheels to meet that payload.
Right.
But if you decide you want to change your tires or something about that setup, the factory is going to flag that, and they're not going to give you a vehicle rating for the full payload or what you previously anticipated, because if you're going to start backing off things, then your truck's not going to be rated to haul that payload.
Right.
But as far as what your specific question is, I would defer to the engineer.
Okay. Do you have a? Sure. Right. That's, even though those are wider patch tires, that makes a difference. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And no problem. Any other questions?
Yeah. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for being here. Hey, okay. I don't think we hit on this the other day, but that pusher axle, that's the one that lifts down the back on a ready mix truck.
Mhm.
Is that an option in Georgia to do now, or is that?
No,
Yeah.
it's
Wouldn't help, I guess.
And what it does is it lengthens your truck, but when that pusher axle goes down, it helps, our payload is more concentrated on the tandem axle on the back of the truck. So even though you may have a front axle that's rated for 23,000 pounds, and that's the legal limit, realistically, you're not going to put that much on there. So what that does is when it comes down, it helps push it up just a little bit, enough to kind of distribute that weight back towards the front just enough. It's something it's popular in other states, but it's, I believe that it's called a bridge master or pusher, but I believe they're high maintenance and costly, whereas there are configurations where you have the tandem with the lift underneath, which would be more advantageous if you're allowing the use of a lift axle. But the pusher is considered a lift because it raises up and down, just like the one underneath next to the tandem.
Just the physics of it seems like at that moment, then you are spreading your weight over another 8 feet, whatever how long. They're big. I mean, they're bigger. I saw one in South Carolina the other day.
Yeah, you'll see them in the Carolinas.
Okay.
So Jimmy, your industry, are y'all bound by your weight limitation? Is that federal law or state law?
Well, it's both. It depends on which road you're on. Obviously, we don't use, if you see a ready-mix truck on an interstate, it's probably empty. It should be empty because otherwise it'd be violating state law. I mean, you can only carry about a 50% payload on an interstate with the ready-mix truck. So we're bound by, so state law is written that says we have a limitation per axle and we have a limitation for the gross weight. So usually, so we're limited at 69,000 pounds plus 5% tolerance. So you're talking about maybe 72,000 pounds would be the gross weight of a truck, the limitation. But the reality is a yard of concrete is going to be 3,500 to 4,000 pounds per yard. So if you have 10 yards in a truck, you'd be looking at 40,000 pounds of product, but the tear weight of the truck is more like 26,000 pounds empty. You add those together, you have a 66,000 pound truck carrying a full payload, but you might have a problem with the weight on the rear axle. So all of a sudden, we're not even talking about 72,000. We're talking about something closer to 66 potentially, but because we can't be over 46 on the rear, then that would put us in violation and we have to back the load off, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's
So-
federal law.
That's state law.
State law.
That's on state route. So like in Alabama, for example, hot mix asphalt and ready mix concrete, as long as they're within 50 miles of their point of origin, that if that's their delivery area, there's no requirement, there's no per axle limitation. They just look at a gross weight for the truck. Same in Tennessee. When they buy their trucks, they buy what's called a zone tag. And so in Tennessee, you can haul up to 74,000 pounds on the state routes with the same truck in Georgia that we use here, but they have what's called a zone tag that just establishes more or less a home base for that truck. And then it says this is going to be the service area for that truck. And as long as they don't leave that, they can and they stay under 74,000, then that addresses that. But the reality is they're not hitting 74,000 because most mixer trucks are going to have an 11-yard drum, 10-yard payload. Same thing on dump trucks. When guys want to get 25 tons, that's 50,000 pounds in the dump, and then the tear weight of the truck might be closer to 16 or 18. So those are the types of numbers we'd be looking at in terms of there. So it's clear as mud.
Yeah. But I guess I was just sitting here thinking that, out of all the trucks or a lot of the trucks on the road, I mean, you guys, when you put the concrete in there, you know what the weight is.
Sure. In each of these scenarios. So if you're leaving a quarry, there's going to be a scale house and the truck's going to go across the scale house. So they know they're going to have a ticket that tells the exact weight of the truck. And then at asphalt plants and at concrete plants, we don't have a scale that the trucks drive over, but those plants are big proportioning operations, right? And if there's they need X amount of asphalt or X amount of concrete, they're going to dial in their mix. And that's going to say, well, per yard, we know we need X amount of pounds per cement and sand and coarse aggregate, X amount of gallons of water. So they know as well how much they're putting in their trucks when they leave those facilities too, as well. So it's pretty exact in those commodities to know what we have in the back of the truck when we leave, and we can more or less control that when we're leaving. For dump trucks, it's more like stuff on the side of the road. If they're hauling off dirt or sand or something like that they can't weigh out right then, that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, and my thought was just, in the forestry industry, they don't really know what they're putting on the truck. And just we've already heard from GDOT that a lot of the containers, they're not, every one of them is not leaving there at 100,000 pounds. Every log truck is not leaving the woods at, 84,000 pounds. And so how do we know what the impact is actually going to be?
Sure.
If they're not, we don't really know that they're all overweight. They may only be a quarter of them overweight. And even if we were to increase it, would every one of them leave at 88,000 pounds? So, but I mean, you guys kind of have that.
Yeah, we have we have an
information.
advantage of that just because of the nature of our business. We know what's going in the mixes, or we know what's being dumped in the truck, and that if a truck is on a scale at a quarry and it's overweight, they've got to back up and they've got to offload some of the rock there to be legal or in compliance. So
Gotcha. Yeah, well, I know when they're at my place, we just have to do the math and hope that we're right. And then they usually drive 20, 30 miles away, and then they call back at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm overweight, I need to come back. So, all right, any other questions? All right, thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Chairman.
Next, we've got Captain Andrew Montgomery with the motor carrier compliance. I think he's joined us online.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Hold on a minute, Captain.
All right. How about now?
All right, we can hear you.
All right. I apologize for not being in attendance today. I've been sick, so I'm a little under the weather.
Sorry to hear that. Good deal. Glad to have you by phone.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to give a little perspective on what we do, and I'll make it brief. I know everybody's been there a long time, so and I apologize if I pause there for anything because like I said, I am sick. So as you said and already introduced me, and I appreciate it, Captain Andrew Montgomery. I'm the executive officer for motor carrier compliance. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do. There's 3 law enforcement divisions within the Department of Public Safety. You got Georgia State Patrol Motor Carrier Compliance Division, which are us, and the Capitol Police. We primarily focus on commercial drivers and vehicle safety. That's what our division is responsible for. The enforcement of commercial motor vehicles is our responsibility. Traffic enforcement of CMVs, compliance reviews, safety audits, that's going into the companies and actually reviewing their paperwork. We do enforcement of size and weight laws, school bus safety inspections. I'm sure we all can agree how important they would be. We do post-crash inspections. So if a CMV is involved in a crash, we'll go out and inspect that vehicle and make a determination, if we can, if there was a mechanical causation factor or was it driver induced, if you will. And then we also conduct hazardous materials inspections. So the enforcement of size and weights, I know that's why we're here, so we'll just kind of cut to that. So how are trucks weighed roadside? We have 19 permanent inspection stations. They're all located on the interstate. We have 1 semi-permanent station in Early County. They're all equipped with virtual weigh in motion scales, which is acronym is WIMS. So basically the suspected overweight trucks are signaled to enter the station for a secondary screening. Then permanent scales equipped to detect axle and tandem gross weight violations. That's when they actually get called into the station and they stop, and then they'll go through and manually weigh each axle to determine if it's an axle weight, tandem weight, or a gross weight violation. The overweight citations are issued for the violation if there's one discovered, which is under the federal bridge formula. So the inspectors can monitor incoming and passing CMVs on the monitors. The system will display motor carrier information such as DOT numbers and safety ratings. On average, we're about 2.9 million vehicles. The slide, if you look on your paperwork, that's just an example of what an overweight and what the monitor looks like and what our officers inside will review. On the roadside, this is actually getting out and manually weighing them out, meaning making a traffic stop and weighing them. So we use a portable hydraulic scale. It's a Haney scale. Officers evaluate, of course, locations that are safe for them to be able to weigh the trucks out, that obviously don't impede traffic if we can. The vehicle stop, scales are placed under each wheel. We'll instruct the driver to pull onto the scales, and then we'll go around and we'll calculate by manually looking at the scale head to determine what the weight is, and then we'll do that calculation. Some technologies for safer roadways. Excuse me. We have our tax system, and then we have a portable or performance-based brake tester. So basically the tax system is installed at the entrance ramps of the interstate. So it'll detect variations in tire size, pressure, and load-bearing force. It's about 95 to 98% accurate detecting violations. So it provides an analysis for mismatched tires, size, flat tires, and missing tires. So it gives us an opportunity to evaluate the vehicle while it's in motion. And then we have a secondary tester, if you will, and it's a performance-based brake tester. And so the vehicle will pull onto the tester, and it will be able to make those determinations based on the wheel speed, and basically what we do with these things is it'll actually give you the sensitivity of the brakes once it's applied. It's a pretty fascinating machine. We have 3 installed at Way Station pits and 3 pending installations. So we're just waiting to try to get them all out to the inspection station so we can utilize these for more accurate brake checks. So the safety considerations, stop and distance of heavier vehicles. That's the biggest thing with weights. I know that's, the weights have been obviously part of the conversation. So, the things to consider with weights is the more weights you place on the vehicle, the longer it's going to take for it to stop. In addition to, and overturn as well, you got to be cautious of disruption in the vehicle's weight as well. So violations found during the inspections, obviously that's safety considerations and driver's hours of service exemptions. The forestry industry in specific, they are exempt from a lot of our out of service or hours of service regulations, and I'll get to that here in just a second. Okay, here's just an example. Excuse my voice. Here's just an example that I want you to consider with weights. So in an ideal scenario, traveling 65 miles an hour, it takes a standard truck carrying legal weight around 2 football fields to stop. So just think, if we increase those weights, then we're increasing the distance that it takes for it to stop. And, a lot of times the discussion goes into, can the roads handle the weights and the bridges and whatnot, but it's not just that to consider, it's also the distance it takes for it to stop. So we increase those things when we add weight to it. So that's just an example, of giving you some type of idea. And 2, you have to consider, you're looking also at the driver's ability, because a lot of times, unfortunately, what we see is the distractions that drivers have with cell phones, right? So the reaction time to, in the event they glance at a phone, then the reaction time, and then what happens is if your reaction time is always going to be delayed, and then at that point you try to apply the brakes. And what I'm saying is we got longer distances once you add weight that we have to consider into that. And maybe I didn't make that as well put as I wanted to, but we're going to move to the next slide. So safety implications of increasing the weight, I've kind of touched on it. Heavier vehicles make it harder for the driver to stay in control of the vehicle. Heavy weight increases the wear and tear on the vehicles, and travel to and from the harvest sites require forestry industry vehicles to operate in less ideal circumstances, meaning they go in and out of the woods all the time. So their vehicles are just most of the time, having to really take on harsh conditions. Oh, let me cut that off, sorry. All right, here's some of our vehicle violations on crib log trailers. Well, this is our top 10 violations. Obviously lamp requirements, which is our lighting, breakout of adjustments. I won't read through the whole thing. The takeaway of it is that out of 888 total inspections, out of 398 vehicles, 63% were out of service. So we got over a 50% out of service after evaluating 888 of them. We'll move to the next slide. This is regarding that intermodal container or chassis that you had spoke on. These are the similar violations that we find. And out of 3,257 total inspections, we had a 43% out of service on them. So I spoke on the hours of service exemptions for forestry industry. So driving interstate only and transporting unmanufactured forestry products are not subject to the hours of service or record of duty status requirements. That means the driver on duty can 16, 18, or 20 hours with no required rest period. A critical factor in stopping a vehicle, regardless of weight, is the driver reaction time. I touched on that briefly. Studies have shown that driving while fatigued, also known as drowsy driving, is as dangerous as drunk driving. The biggest thing I want, excuse me, that I'd like for you guys to be able to take away out of this whole presentation, and I know I was quick, is that we're 4th in the nation on fatality crashes with commercial motor vehicles. In 2020, we had 234 fatalities involving CMV crashes and 2,839 injuries involving CMV crashes. Those factors, there's a lot to really digest in how we get to those numbers. But, you know, our mission and our goal is safety. And, you know, anything that opposes that is something that we always try to combat, if you will. And we just really believe in the mission, really believe that we can try to make a difference with what we do. And I hope you'll consider some of the facts that I've thrown out there for you today. And I appreciate your time. If I have any questions, I'll be glad to take them. And I apologize for my voice.
No, you're good, Captain Montgomery. Thank you. Quick question on the violations. The top 10. I don't see being overweight as one of those. How, is it in the top 10 of violations?
Well, weights necessarily isn't always the way I describe it. Weights are always an issue, and the reason why is because they're always going to contribute to the actual causation of the crash. And let me try to explain this. So weights are always the factor, and what I mean is if you have a driver that's distracted, and then his reaction time, you know, the weights are going to be a factor. If he disrupts the motion of the vehicle, meaning a car pulls out in front of him and he goes to, you know, snatch the wheel, if you will, that disruption and all that weight is going to shift at some point. So the shifting of weight is always going to be a factor in that. So it's not always a direct cause, but it's an indirect cause to always consider, because obviously the more weight you have, the more you got to be able to control. And the moment it becomes disrupted is the moment that it really becomes catastrophic, because you can't really get it back. If that makes sense. So it's not a direct, but it's an indirect.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Chairman Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Captain, I like, you address a lot about equipment and weight and brakes and those type things, but I drive the roads a lot, and speed seems to be the biggest factor in my mind that causes accidents and safety problems. What's your take on that point of view?
Well, excuse me, speed is definitely an issue. Really, if you really look at the data, and I look at it quite a bit, our biggest factor really is distracted driving. We have a Stop the Threat campaign that does address speeding, distracted driving, and following too close, which are things that I feel like are definitely our top crash causation factors. And we go out every month and we focus directly on those three components to try to reduce our crashes. Like I said, being fourth in the nation, that's a pretty significant rating, and we maintain that rating. And if my memory serving me correct, and I don't have the notes in front of me, we were going to about 17. I think it was about 17 deaths per month, and we are now at 19 deaths per month in fatality crashes, which is quite a bit. I mean, that's more than, you know, more people that's in that room, I'm sure. So, but speed is always a factor, because the faster you go, you know, the longer it's going to take to stop as well. So that would be my position on that. Speed's always a factor.
I guess too, along the violations, Captain, do you have to be able to see these violations, or can you just pull them over and start checking for these violations?
The way that we're set up, we can evaluate, or we can observe a violation and then stop them. Are you asking about probable cause necessarily? Is that what you're getting to?
Right. Do you have to see the tail light out, or how do you know that the brakes are out of service and those kind of things? Is it because of a violation that triggered you to stop them, or can you just pull them over and check them out?
No, sir, that we have the authority to stop them and evaluate them at any given time. I mean, it doesn't have to be an observation made. You can stop them and inspect them, which, you know, that's the only way you could evaluate those violations, is to have that authority to be able to do so.
Do y'all keep up with those numbers and how many you pull over and don't have a violation?
Yes, sir. I mean, I could get those numbers for you. I mean, how many trucks are stopped that have 0 violations versus how many trucks are stopped that do?
Okay. Yeah. I think we'd like to see that, being we've kind of we've got one side. Let's just, you know, see what the other side is. as well. And then I don't know if you can answer this or not, but I've heard a lot of complaints, not necessarily in the commercial truck driving part, but like 1-ton trucks. Do they fall under some certain federal law now where y'all have the ability to cite them, or do they have to have certain requirements now if they're driving, if they're a plumber and they're hauling a backhoe and I guess they get over that weight limit? Do they fall under some kind of category now? Because I get lots of complaints of just electricians and plumbers and bricklayers and fence builders and just small business people that they've got them a 1-ton truck and they got a shovel hanging out the back and they get stopped and they're cited with an offense. Yeah. Penny, Patty Bentley's not here, but do they fall under y'all's preview of that, or can you touch on that any?
Yes, sir. So to define a commercial motor vehicle is anything that's rated over 10,001 pounds and used in a commercial business. So what that means is typically your 1-ton trucks will fall within that category. But here's another thing that I always like to mention. Yes, we do regulate those, but we also have where we conduct outreaches all over the state at any request for any company at any time to educate and to make sure that we don't place companies in a predicament to where it's kind of the I got you moment. We try to go out and educate them prior to them actually being on the road and operating, and that way we can get them in compliance before they actually get out there. So if you have any constituents that are having issues, contact me, let me know, and I'll put them in touch with one of our wherever they're at in the state, and whether it be a region or an auditor, and that way we can help them learn what it is that they're required, and that way when they do hit the road, they'll be prepared.
Yeah, well, and a lot of it goes back to that driver shortage. I'm assuming that they have to have a different driver's license than a normal driver because they're over the weight limit. So then you back to another driver shortage, and I think that's kind of
that'll take effect once you start hitting the 26,001 in combination over. So like if you have, let's say for example, a 1-ton truck, they'll usually rate somewhere around between 12 and 14,000 depending on what it is, and then they're hauling this depends on what size trailer they're hauling. If they get up in the 16,000 to 18,000 range, if depending on the business and what it is, and definitely I know you're saying about plumbers and whatnot, they can still operate with a Class C license, and so the license isn't an issue as long as they stay under the 26.1 in combination weight. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it kind of goes back to that other argument with truck weights, is we don't really know how many are driving, overweight. And I'm sure they're not always hauling over, they're not always pulling the trailer that's got the piece of machinery. It may be only to a job once a week, or, but I know that's kind of a different conversation, but just, I know it's back to our earlier conversation of driver shortages and having the ability to get that license and be able to do that. But I think Chairman Jaspers has got a question here.
Just real quickly, it is late, but on that commercial motor vehicles crashes, you have 234 fatalities. I would, at some point, Captain, I'd love to see you just kind of provide me or the committee with a breakdown of what they are and how many of those are who's at fault sort of thing is what I'm looking for.
Sure, absolutely. I'll make a note of that real quick. I know there was one other thing that you had asked. Well, trying to remember what it was because I was trying to write it down. There was one other thing that you were asking me to take a note of and get back with you on. Do you remember what that was?
That was on the violations.
On the violations, right?
Yes, the trucks that are pulled over, that there's no violations.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I know also too, fourth in the nation is pretty serious, but we also have a lot going on in our state, and still the #1 place to do business. And I don't know how there's just a lot going on, I guess, versus other states. That's not making an excuse, but I know that probably plays into it because everybody wants to come here and do business here. So obviously we're going to have more safety concerns as well. So
Well, I think it speaks to your point when they were making, when the discussion was about the surrounding states and, that they may allow more, with our state, we're fourth in the nation. So we obviously have a problem, and where we stand right now with whether it be our legal weights or just the way we conduct, business and the way our laws are. I mean, we're still that high, if that makes sense. And, we're out in full force. We developed a campaign, as I said before, to try to reduce those crashes the best we can. So, I think Georgia's on the right track as far as our mission statement as we speak. And I just appreciate y'all taking the time to hear our perspective.
all right, anybody else? All right, Captain, thank you for being with us, and hope you get well soon.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Have a good day.
All right, you too. All right, Kathleen, been patiently waiting. ACCG. The floor is yours.
Okay. It's only 7 slides. It's more of just a visual to help me get through this presentation. So I'm Kathleen Bowen. I'm here on behalf of ACCG. Talking about truck weights is one of my favorite topics because it never goes away.
Great.
And every time I come and hear the topic come up, I learn something new. So I appreciate y'all's patience in being here. And I hope you're like me and you're learning even more every time this conversation comes up. So just to start off, local governments, and before we start, Demetrius is my counterpart at GMA if he wants to wave. So I'll speak on behalf of local governments here, and that we do own and maintain 80% of the roads in Georgia. So we do have a large piece of the transportation network in this state. And then counties maintain around 8,000 bridge structures. So to give you the baseline knowledge, most of your county roads are built to withstand 56,000 pounds. The life cycle of a road is 15 to 20 years, but we go way beyond that life cycle now just because we have to. And then bridge life structure, lifespan is 40 to 50 years. And currently, just so you know, there's 1,285 bridges that are closed or posted for weight limitations, and 97% of those are on our local roads. I wanted to give you a couple of examples of the main need of counties right now is maintaining our current infrastructure, and that includes resurfacing. These 3 counties either have a regular single county T-SPLOST or are in a regional T-SPLOST. So there's extra sales tax dollars going towards transportation purposes in these 3 examples here. Just Bryan County was only resurfacing their roads on a 66-year rotation before they passed their T-SPLOST. And now they're on a 30-year resurfacing. Lamar County just passed their T-SPLOST last week. They just did an assessment before they had that referendum and found that 70% of their roads are fair or worse. And they're only averaging 5 miles per road of resurfacing each year. With this T-SPLOST that passed, though, they hope to start resurfacing 20 miles or more. Lowndes County is averaging about 10 miles of resurfacing annually. I'm telling all you this now to show you that counties are struggling to keep up with their current infrastructure and struggling to resurface what's in their inventory now at existing weight limits. Colquitt County, the chair's home county here, I wanted to bring them up because they are doing something to address the heavier trucks that they see, which are the poultry feed trucks. And I had peanut wagons in there and I was told they're no longer wagons, they're now peanut trailers. So they are trying to address what they're seeing in their community and to expand on the life of their roads. So they are adding an extra 1 inch of asphalt over existing county roads, and that's a 1/2 inch of leveling and a 1/2 inch of topping. And then where they're seeing the heavier trucks coming on a more frequent basis, they're making those routes wider. So they are currently 10 feet lanes, they're making them 12 feet lanes. And this is helping prevent less cracking and adding to the life of their road. It is more expensive. Colquitt County said it's about 35% more to do this. And their goal, they currently have a T-SPOS in place, and they are trying to do about 30 miles per road per year, which over the 5-year span, their goal is 197 miles. So I think the majority of their T-SPOS is going towards resurfacing because it's such a need. So why has ACCG traditionally opposed truck weights? As you heard from GDOT about the state routes, heavier trucks will lead to the accelerated deterioration of our roads and bridges. The federal DOT weight limit is 80,000 pounds. So these heavier trucks are not on the interstates, they're on your local roads and bridges, and they're on your state routes. We think that the current weight limits are max. As I told you, most of our county roads are only built to handle 56,000 pounds. There's concerns about the number of bridges that are posted. That we have school kids that have to walk across bridges to catch school buses because the school buses cannot go over these local bridges. And then we also have challenges with the Motor Carrier Compliance Division being able to enforce truck weights because they're the only ones that can enforce truck weights. Local law enforcement does not and cannot enforce truck weights. So I think that's it. If there's anything I haven't covered or any data you want me to cover, please let me be gathering that because I know this conversation is going to continue. And yes, any questions? Yes.
On a topic that gripes me, and I'll make it local. My local Crawford County is a rural county. Timber production is one of the largest industries in that state, and sand. And yet they go to pave a dirt road and they do it with a minimum, probably the 56, if that. So why are counties paving roads with 56,000 gross limit when they know 80,000 is going to go across that road day after day after day when thousands of timber acres are being harvested, and they get upset that the road's tearing up, but it's not the trucking fault. It's the county's fault for not having a proper engineered road. And I mean, what do y'all do as an organization about informing some of our counties on that issue?
Well, when we presented last week at the House Transportation Committee, we said that GDOT is the expert and most of our counties are adopting the same design manuals as GDOT, but I guess it just goes back to historically, this is what they are built for. Their baseline probably couldn't handle 80,000. You're talking about completely reconstructing a road. I don't think you could resurface a road to handle.
Well, I'm talking about some of these new dirt roads that they want paved, that their residents that drive little small cars over is fine, but knowing that industries will have to use those highways, roads, and the standards are not up to what the state's things are.
I guess they don't
I don't know.
know,
It's just a
yeah.
frustration on my part.
They might not know where the timber harvesting is going to happen, how often it's going to happen. Maybe they just are not planning for that.
Well, I just think counties ought to take some responsibility for.
I'm going to ask, our annual conference is this week. I'm going to ask some counties that question.
You know, I'm sorry. Thank you for
let me vent. Good question. Good comment. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another quick question. I hope it's going to go deeper than I want it to, but we recently had someone out in the county that decided to build a big old pond on these acres that they bought. And so they put a few cows on it because county turned them down and said, no, you couldn't permit it. And instead they went to the Department of Ag at the federal level and they got a permit to build the pond. And they have totally torn up the road, as in 30 to 40 truckloads a day of dump trucks. Is there any recourse or anything that the county can do to go back and fix that? Or is there, They can't stop the limit. They don't check it. But I mean, is there anything they can do when something like that happens?
There is. I'm not. an
We can go
attorney, but
offline if you
yes,
want,
th-
but that came
yes.
out of nowhere. So the road was a good one and now it's not worth a lick.
For the timber harvesting, they can require a bond and then you can
Mhm.
collect on that bond. But for other types of vehicles, you have to prove that that they did the gross negligence to the road and
Okay.
there is recourse. I'll
Okay.
cite that law. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, how many counties are taking the concept of Colquitt and trying to just spend a little more and make them wider and make them thicker and you just using that same concept?
I would have to go and ask. I mean, I haven't asked all 159 counties, but I have asked. I know that where there's mills or where there's a lumber yard, I have heard that they are beefing up those routes. But Colquitt County was one of the first to pass T-Splost, and they knew that this was going to make an impact to their network to take this approach. So I'm not sure if other counties going to the level that they're going to.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All righty. Well, thank
Thank you
you
very
for
much.
being here. Always good to have y'all around and here. Thank you. Mark, save the best for last. You're gonna solve all the problems. We're gonna put it on the rail and haul it all the way.
Well, the Gettysburg Address took 3 minutes. That's what I'm shooting for. First of all, the main thing I want to accomplish today is just to thank you and thank this council for what you've already done. As you recall, back in 2018, you made a recommendation to create a short line tax credit. Representative Bentley brought that bill on behalf of the council. It passed in the 2 years that's been in place. It is basically maxed out. The way that credit works is that it's capped by the number of total short line miles in the state. The credits for $3,500 per mile. And so each company, each of the 29 short lines can avail themselves of the credit depending on how many miles of track that they have. And each year we've used that to the max. So I really want to thank you for that. Also, as you all know, you also extended that the sunset on that last year in Senate Bill 6. So I just wanted to thank you for that. You'd ask us to present you a need and a solution. That short line tax credit is being used in other states. Georgia, back in 2018, we were the first state to do that in about 15 years. Oklahoma had implemented one back in 2006. And then after Georgia implemented the tax credit in 2018, about a half a dozen states have followed suit, and it's picking up steam around the country. Our ask would be would you all consider doubling that per mile allowance from 3,500 to 7,000? As I said, based upon the number of short line miles in the state, the current cost to the state is between $5 and $6 million. It's 5.3, I believe, is the exact number. And so doubling that from 3,500 to 7,000, keeping in mind it's a 50% credit. So for every dollar that the state invests through the credit, the short line company has invested that dollar as well. So it's a relatively inexpensive investment for the state, relatively speaking, but it's had tremendous impact around rural Georgia. In the materials that I gave you, it shows it's this document. I think Blake had sent him had separated these two out, but basically the folks over at GDOT every 4 years have to do a state rail plan. They've identified the short-term and long-term needs for freight rail. It's in Georgia, it's about a little over $300 million in short-term needs have been identified. A little less than $2 billion in long-term needs have been identified, and just hitting singles and doubles like you guys have been doing is the way to do that. I'm never going to stand up here and say, hey, let's go spend $2 billion this year and knock it all out. We just have to do a little bit every year. So there's more in the presentation. There are other things going on, Mr. Chairman, from visiting with us this summer, and also just in your role as the transportation chair. that we have other issues that we're interested in, but just wanted to focus today. Thank you for what you've already done on the short line tax credit. If you're considering proposals to put in your report, I think that would be, increasing that amount for the short line tax credit would be a very good public policy. Well, thank you. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them. And Blake, I do think they have the materials in their folder. So if I can provide anything in addition, just let me know. Thank you.
Mark, I got one quick one on that. Do we know where those are being used? Do you have what locations and what lines? and
Well,
where in the state?
if you'll look at the beginning of that presentation, you'll see where the short line railroads are in Georgia. They are all over the state. As you know, they vary in size. I could, part of that breakdown is proprietary just because of, in terms of how they've invested it. But I could get, I have some materials. I just didn't bring it today that showed some specific projects that had gotten done in specific places all over the state that they had used the tax credit for. And I think when we had a chance to had the shortliners together this summer, they were saying, hey, this is a project that we would not have been able to do but for this participation. And one of the challenges with the short line group is that they're just a hardworking group of people. It's hard to get them to meetings. It's hard to get them to come to something like this. And that's why it's our pleasure to try to articulate for them. But I do have a list of some projects that I think I'd be glad to share with everyone, depending on what area of the state you're in. There's things happening in your backyard that are taking place, some investments that you all have helped make that are making the ability to move freight around the state better because of what you all have done.
Well, I think just on behalf of the committee, I think if you could, what you could share, when you could share that with us, that would, help us as far as trying to increase that and see that these projects are happening everywhere and what they're doing, and that they wouldn't have been able to do this, without that kind of deal, I think would be very useful.
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. That map that is included in your materials does show the needs that are out there that the various companies have already identified, and their ability to use the short line tax credit would be there on those projects. Now, whether they use them on those particular projects, remains to be seen. A little bit of that is our business decisions that they make. But I would, I will take. We're meeting kind of like Kathleen. Our group is meeting later this week. And one of the things I'm going to ask them to do in each area of the state is just to give me some specific projects that you all would be familiar with just back home that frankly, you ought to take credit for and helping make happen because of what you've done with that tax credit.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Well, I guess that's it. I want to, say thank you to all of the committee members that have stayed with us here and stayed with us online. I know we've got a lot of people joining online, and I want to thank Deidre and Blake for getting everything coordinated. And this is, if I was at home, I'd still be going. So I'm going to get off early today. But thank y'all. We'll be on the lookout for more emails and announcements about further meetings. And I don't know if my co-chair has anything to add. But if nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank y'all for being here.